Hello guys, welcome to Fiction Quest. So in this video, we will see, what if Naruto's cooking was so divine that every girl in DxD fell in love with him after one bite? If you enjoy these kinds of stories, don't forget to show us some love by hitting the like button and subscribing to the channel. Your support means the world to us. Now, let's start the story. Chapter 1. The Flavor of a New Beginning. The first thing Naruto Uzumaki registered was the silence. It was a thick, heavy blanket, utterly alien after the constant cacophony of war, the screaming, the explosions, the grinding of earth and the shattering of hope. Here, there was only the gentle rustle of leaves and the distant, unfamiliar hum of a sleeping city. He sat up, his joints protesting with a dull ache that had become his constant companion. The ground was cool, damp grass, not the cratered, chakra-scorched wasteland he last remembered. Towering over him were trees, their leaves a vibrant, peaceful green under the soft glow of strange, electric lights lining a paved road. There were no ghosts here, no lingering echoes of friends lost. He was alone. Again, a hollow ache settled in his chest, a feeling he hadn't truly felt since he was a child. He had won. He and Sasuke had clashed, released the infinite Tsukuyomi, and brought an end to the fourth great ninja war. He remembered a blinding flash of light, the tearing sensation of space itself coming apart at the seams, and then, this quiet, clean, blessedly mundane world. He pushed himself to his feet, his worn Anobi pants and tattered orange and black jacket feeling deeply out of place. He had nothing, no wallet, no identification, not even a clear idea of what country he was in. He did have the simmering, boundless ocean of chakra within him. Kurama, a warm, steady presence in the back of his mind, but what good was a Rasenshuriken against an empty stomach? In the weeks that followed, Naruto learned to survive. He was a quick study, a master of adaptation forged in a world that had tried its best to break him. He observed, he listened, and he worked. He took odd jobs, hauling cargo at the docks, washing dishes in the back of a bustling restaurant, his monstrous stamina allowing him to work 3 shifts back to back without breaking a sweat. It was during his time in that cramped, sweltering kitchen that he found a new kind of peace. The head chef was an old, grizzled man named Tanaka who barked orders and wielded his knife with the precision of a master swordsman. He saw something in the strange, bright-eyed boy who never tired and never complained. He saw a focus, an intensity. One day, he thrust a knife into Naruto's hand and pointed to a mountain of onions. "Don't just chop, boy," he'd grunted. "Feel it, understand it. Every ingredient has a story." Naruto took to it like a fish to water. The focus required, the simple, honest transformation of raw ingredients into something that could bring a moment of happiness to a stranger. It was a balm to his weary soul. It was creation, not destruction. He poured his own chakra into it, not consciously at first, but it flowed from him as naturally as breathing. He found that a delicate trickle of his energy could bring out the richest flavors in a broth, that a whisper of wind-natured chakra could make noodles impossibly light, that the warmth of his own spirit could turn a simple bowl of ramen into something more. It was his own private jutsu, a secret art of consolation. After a few months, with a small bundle of cash saved and a deep gratitude for the old chef, Naruto went his own way. He found a small, forgotten corner of a park in a town called Kuo, a quiet spot under a large ginkgo tree. Using scavenged wood and purchased supplies, he built a small, unassuming food stall. It was simple, rustic, with a single wooden counter, a few stools, and a large pot that was soon filled with a simmering, fragrant pork broth. He had no sign, no name for his little establishment. He didn't need one. He just wanted to cook. The first night was quiet. The sun bled below the horizon, and the sky turned a deep, bruised purple. The aroma began to drift from his stall, a scent that was more than just food. It was rich and complex, carrying the savory promise of slow-cooked pork, the earthy depth of mushrooms and kombu, the sharp, clean notes of ginger and green onion. But beneath it all, there was something else. A warmth, a feeling of profound, unconditional welcome that wrapped around the senses like a hug. It was this feeling that found her first. A small, white cat with curious gold eyes and a perpetually unimpressed expression trotted along the park path. She was on her nightly patrol, her senses sharp, cataloging the territory. Then the scent hit her. It stopped her dead in her tracks, her ears twitching. It wasn't just food. It was home. It was a roaring hearth on a cold night, the safety of a warm lap, a sense of peace that her guarded stoic heart hadn't felt in a very, very long time. Her instincts, her very being, were drawn to it. Cautiously, she padded closer, her movements silent. She saw the stall, the warm light of the lantern hanging from its eaves, and the young man with sun-kissed hair tending to the large pot. He moved with an easy, confident grace, his expression one of serene focus. He didn't seem to notice her as she hopped onto one of the stools, her tail giving a slight, involuntary twitch. Naruto looked up and saw the cat. He smiled, a genuine, easy grin that reached his impossibly blue eyes. "Hey there," he said, his voice quiet. "You hungry?" He ladled a small amount of the rich broth into a tiny dish, adding a few slivers of tender pork and a perfectly cooked slice of Naruto maki. He placed it on the counter. The cat, Kaneko Tuju, stared at the offering, then up at him. There was no trickery in his eyes, no ulterior motive. Just simple, open kindness. She leaned forward and took a delicate sip of the broth. The world exploded, not in fire and fury, but in a tidal wave of pure, unadulterated warmth. The flavor was divine, a perfect harmony of salt and fat and umami that danced on her tongue. But it was the feeling that shattered her composure. The broth tasted of unwavering loyalty. The pork, of hard-won strength and resilience. The noodles he added a moment later were imbued with an impossible lightness, a taste of freedom. And woven through it all was a profound sense of kindness, a feeling of being seen, understood, and accepted without reservation. A girl who had built walls of ice around her heart to protect herself from a past that haunted her, it was overwhelming. It bypassed her defenses, seeped into the cracks of her soul, and warmed her from the inside out. A single, crystalline tear escaped her golden eye and traced a path through her white fur. The feeling was so intense, so pure, that it was almost painful. She quickly lapped up every last drop, then, without a second glance, hopped off the stool and vanished back into the shadows of the park, her mind reeling. She needed to tell the president. "The energy readings are fluctuating again, President." Tsubaki Shinra's voice was crisp and professional, her eyes fixed on the tablet in her hand. She stood beside Sona Citri on the roof of Kuo Academy's old school building, the command center for the student council's nightly patrols. Sona adjusted her glasses, her gaze sweeping over the sleeping town below. "Fluctuating how? Demonic. Fallen. It's not another stray, is it?" "No, that's the problem," Tsubaki said, a frown creasing her brow. "It's neither. I don't know how to describe it. It's not holy, but it feels pure. It's incredibly dense, yet gentle. It flares for a moment, then stabilizes. It's centered around the municipal park." Sona's interest was piqued. The supernatural world was one of established rules, of clear energy signatures. Demonic power felt a certain way, as did the power of angels and fallen angels. Sacred gears had their own unique wavelengths. This was something else entirely, an anomaly. And Sona Citri did not tolerate anomalies in her territory. "Let's go," she said, her tone leaving no room for argument. "We'll investigate personally." Within minutes, the two devils were moving through the park, their presence concealed from human eyes. As they drew closer to the source, they began to smell it. It was a captivating aroma, one that seemed to pull at some fundamental, forgotten part of their beings. It smelled of comfort and contentment. They found the stall tucked away under the ginkgo tree. It was a picture of tranquility. The young man with blonde hair was wiping down his counter, his movements economical and precise. He seemed utterly ordinary, yet the gentle, potent energy Tsubaki had detected was radiating from him in soft waves. Sona and Tsubaki exchanged a look. This was their source, a human food stall. It was, to use Sona's favorite word, illogical. They approached, dropping their concealment. Naruto looked up, and his eyes widened slightly in surprise. It wasn't every day that two impeccably dressed, beautiful women who carried themselves with the authority of queens visited his humble stall. "Good evening," Sona said, her voice polite but with an undercurrent of sharp intelligence. "We were drawn by the unique aroma. Are you open for business?" "Always," Naruto replied with a welcoming smile. "What can I get for you?" Sona scanned the simple setup. She needed data. A baseline. 2 bowls of your standard ramen, please. Naruto nodded and set to work. He moved with a practiced, fluid rhythm that was mesmerizing to watch. The straining of the broth, the cooking of the fresh noodles, the art. Full arrangement of the toppings, it was a dance of perfect efficiency. He placed the 2 steaming bowls before them. The scent was even more intoxicating up close. Sona picked up her spoon, her analytic mind already breaking down the situation. Hypothesis. The food is enchanted. Possible applications. Mind control, information gathering, soul manipulation. She took a sip of the broth. Her thought process screeched to a halt. The flavor was exquisite, a level of culinary perfection she hadn't thought possible. But that wasn't what stunned her. The broth tasted of perfect, unshakable order. It was the taste of a complex equation solving itself, of a flawless strategy executed to perfection, of every piece on a chessboard moving in perfect harmony. It was a feeling of absolute clarity and control, a feeling she constantly strove for but rarely achieved. It resonated with the very core of her being. She glanced at Tsubaki. Her queen, her ever-composed right hand, was staring into her bowl, her chopsticks frozen in midair. Tsubaki's expression was one of stunned, blissful peace. To her, the ramen tasted of unwavering devotion, of the quiet, profound satisfaction that came from serving a purpose one truly believed in. It was an affirmation of her entire existence. They finished their meals in a shared, reverent silence. Sona placed her chopsticks down neatly, her mind racing to reconcile the experience with the known laws of her world. This was no simple enchantment. This wasn't a spell woven into the food. The power was the food. It was a phenomenon that defied categorization. How? Sona started, her voice barely a whisper. What is this? Naruto just smiled. It's just ramen. The simplicity of his answer was more confounding than any complex explanation. Sona stood, acing the correct payment on the counter, her mind a whirlwind of possibilities and strategic implications. This man, this cook, was either the most dangerous unknown variable to enter her territory in years, or the most valuable. Thank you for the meal, she said, her composure regained, though a slight tremor remained in her voice. It was memorable. As they walked away, Tsubaki finally spoke. President, what was that? His power level is negligible, but that feeling. I don't know, Sona admitted, a rare occurrence. But it is something Rias needs to be aware of. Immediately, she pulled out her phone, a specially designed one for supernatural communication, and dialed a familiar number. Sona, to what do I owe the pleasure of a late-night call? Rias Grimori's smooth, confident voice came through the receiver. Rias, Sona said, her tone urgent and devoid of their usual playful rivalry. There is something in my territory you need to see. At the municipal park. It's illogical. The call had ended, leaving Naruto to his cleanup. The 2 women had been intense, but polite. He shrugged it off. As long as people enjoyed his food, he was happy. He doused his small charcoal grill and began to wipe down the last of the bowls, the peaceful quiet of the night returning. A soft breeze rustled the leaves of the ginkgo tree above him. He felt it before he saw them, 2 new presences, far more potent than the last. One felt like royalty, a deep, powerful energy that was both commanding and surprisingly warm. The other was electric, a playful, crackling power that hinted at a storm just barely held in check. With a dark, sorrowful undercurrent, he looked up from his work. 2 more women were approaching, stepping out of the shadows and into the warm glow of his lantern. The first was a stunning beauty with long, crimson hair that seemed to capture the light and hold it hostage. Her blue-green eyes held an aristocratic confidence, and she walked with the unshakable grace of a predator. The woman beside her was a different kind of beautiful, with long black hair tied in a ponytail and a figure that defied belief. She had a sultry, playful smile on her face, but her violet eyes held a deep, knowing intelligence that hinted at a much more complex nature. Rias Grimori, heiress to one of the underworld's most powerful families, and her queen, Akano Himahima, the priestess of thunder, had arrived. They stopped before his stall, their gazes taking in the simple setup and the unassuming young man standing behind it. Sona had sounded completely flustered, a state so rare it was cause for immediate alarm. This was the source. Good evening, Rias said, her voice like velvet. We heard the food here was out of this world. I hope we're not too late. Naruto dried his hands on a cloth, his own blue eyes meeting theirs without a trace of intimidation. He simply saw two more potential customers. A friendly, genuine smile spread across his face, a smile that had DxD armed hardened shinobi and swayed nations. Never too late, he replied, his voice warm and welcoming. Take a seat. What can I get for you? Far away, in a place of forgotten chaos and unending twilight, a slumbering ancient will stirred from a dreamless sleep. For the first time in millennia, it had tasted something on the cosmic winds. A flavor, a scent, a feeling. It was a sensation so pure, so potent, so utterly delicious that it caused the very fabric of the dimensional gap to tremble in anticipation. And the ancient hunger, for the first time in an age, began to awaken. Chapter 1 End. Chapter 2. A Table for Devils. The steam that rose from the 2 bowls of ramen Naruto placed on the counter was different from the simple water vapor of a moment before. It swirled with an energy that was almost visible, carrying on it a scent that went far beyond mere food. It was an invitation, a promise of something more. Rias Gramori, who had dined at the tables of kings and archdukes in the underworld, found herself leaning forward, utterly captivated. Akano, beside her, had a playful smile on her lips, but her violet eyes watched Naruto with a sharp, analytical intensity, trying to court the man as she would a complex weather pattern. It smells divine, Rias commented, her voice a low purr. It was a test. The word, divine, held significant weight in their world, a potential trig. For a hostile reaction if this man had any connection to the demonic. Naruto simply offered another of his disarming smiles. Just pork broth, noodles, and a few secrets, he said, his tone light and open, betraying no hidden allegiances. He leaned back against his prep table, giving them space, an unassuming host in his own small kingdom. Rias picked up her spoon. She was the king of her peerage, a strategist who thought 5 moves ahead in any engagement. This was an engagement. The objective: to understand the source of this power. She took a delicate sip of the broth. Her world, for a timeless second, dissolved into pure sensation. The flavor was a symphony, each note perfectly pitched. There was the deep, resonant bass of the pork, cooked for hours until it was a liquid essence of savory richness. Then came the bright, clear melody of the shoyu tear, a counterpoint of salty, fermented depth. But beneath the culinary perfection was the feeling, the impossible, undeniable feeling of the dish. It tasted of freedom, not a vague, philosophical freedom, but a tangible, exhilarating release. It was the taste of shattering the chains of a political engagement she despised, of standing on a battlefield not as the heiress Gramori, but as Rias, a commander leading her chosen family to a victory earned through their own strength. It was the fierce loyalty of Akano at her side, the unwavering steel of Kiba's sword. The silent, immovable strength of Kaneko, the innocent faith of Asia, and even the loud, burgeoning potential of Issei. The broth was a liquid manifestation of her deepest desires, a taste of the life she was fighting to build for herself. Her grip on the spoon tightened. This was more than food. This was power. She glanced at her queen. Akano had also taken a sip, and the playful mask she wore so expertly had vanished. Her eyes were wide, her lips slightly parted in a silent, oh. The sultry, teasing aura she projected was gone, replaced by a raw, profound stillness. If the ramen tasted of Rias's ambitions, for Akano, it tasted of peace. Her first sensation was that of a clear, clean sky after a violent thunderstorm. The air was fresh, the world washed new, and the rage of the lightning was a distant memory. The flavor cut through the tangled, bitter roots of her past. It didn't erase the pain of her mother's death or the self-loathing she carried for her fallen angel heritage. But it soothed the ache. It was a moment of pure, untainted happiness, a feeling she so rarely allowed herself. The broth tasted of a mother's gentle hand, of a life where she wasn't half angel, half devil. But simply, Akano. It was a taste of acceptance, a warmth that pushed back the ever-present shadows she hid behind her sadistic smile. A single, hot tear traced a path down her cheek, and she quickly brushed it away, hoping Rias hadn't noticed. Rias had noticed. She saw the crack in her queen's flawless facade and knew that whatever power this man wielded, it was terrifyingly potent. It didn't just charm the senses, it touched the soul. They ate in silence, the quiet of the park punctuated only by the soft sounds of their enjoyment. When they were finished, the bowls were empty, gleaming as if they had been polished clean. Rias placed her chopsticks down, her mind racing. That was, she began, choosing her words carefully, the most remarkable ramen I have ever had. Where did you learn to cook like this? Here and there, Naruto answered vaguely, collecting their bowls. Picked it up mostly in the last place I worked. The old man there said you gotta put a little of yourself into every dish. A little of yourself. Akano leaned forward, her usual playful demeanor returning, though her eyes held a new, deeper curiosity. My, if this is just a little of you, I'd be very interested in getting a whole lot more. Her voice was a silken caress, a practiced tool of seduction she had honed for years. Naruto paused his cleaning and looked at her, his blue eyes clear and direct. He didn't blush or stammer. He didn't get flustered or preen under the attention. He just smiled, a simple, friendly smile. Glad you liked it. Akano felt a strange jolt. It was like pushing on a door she expected to be locked, only to find it wasn't there at all. Her flirtations, her seductive power, had simply passed right through him, utterly failing to find purchase. He wasn't rejecting her, he was just treating her like a person who had enjoyed a meal. The novelty of it was as intoxicating as the ramen had been. Rias seized the opening. You are new to Kuo town, she stated, not a question. A man with your talents must have goals, ambitions. Perhaps I can help you achieve them. Not really, Naruto said with a shrug, wiping down the counter. My only plan for tomorrow is to decide whether to add bamboo shoots to the menu. It's a big decision. His utter lack of guile was baffling. Rias had expected a negotiation, a parry and thrust of offers and demands. Instead, she got culinary deliberations. A talent like yours shouldn't be hidden away in a park at night, she pressed, shifting her strategy. I am the president of the Occult Research Club at the local academy. It's a social club, of a sort. We appreciate unique individuals. I could offer you a position, a very lucrative contract, as our personal chef and consultant. She let the offer hang in the air, dangling the promise of protection, resources, and a place within her influential circle. Naruto stopped wiping the counter and thought for a moment. A club, a boss. It sounded like exactly what he had just escaped. A life of obligations, of being a tool in someone else's plans. He had spent his entire life fighting for others, carrying the weight of the world on his shoulders. This small stall, this simple life, was his. I appreciate the offer, I really do, he said, his sincerity unmistakable. But I'm happy right here. I'm not looking for a job. I just want to make ramen. The refusal, polite but absolute, hung in the air. Rias Grimori was not used to being told no. Lesser devils scrambled for a chance to be in her presence, let alone receive a direct offer of patronage. Yet this human, this enigma, had turned her down for the sake of bamboo shoots. It was infuriating. It was fascinating. The offer stands, Rias said, her tone cool but her eyes burning with a new fire. He was no longer just an asset to be acquired. He was a puzzle to be solved. A prize to be won. She stood, her regal bearing unruffled. We will be back. Akano gave Naruto a final, lingering look. A slow smile spreading across her face. Yes, she purred, her voice promising a great deal more than just another meal. We certainly will. As the two devils disappeared into the night, Naruto let out a long breath. They were intense. He felt a faint echo of the political maneuvering he'd witnessed in Konoha, but without the simmering threat of war underneath. It was interesting. He looked at his clean stall, the steam from his pot finally beginning to dissipate into the cool night air, and felt a quiet sense of satisfaction. He had said no. He was in control. For the first time in a very long time. His life was truly his own. The next afternoon, the Occult Research Club room was abuzz. The large, Baroque room in the old school building, usually filled with a comfortable, if somewhat chaotic, energy, was dominated by a single topic of conversation. And then the broth, it was like it understood me, Rias was saying, her chin resting in her hand as she stared out the window, a dreamy look in her eyes. For me, it was the chashu pork, Akano added, pouring tea with a little more flourish than usual. So tender, so full of strength, it felt like being held by a strong, reliable man. Kaneko, curled up on the sofa munching on a chocolate bar, spoke without opening her eyes. It tasted like a nap in the sun. Kiba Yuto, the handsome knight of the group, leaned against the wall. A thoughtful smile on his face. It sounds fascinating. To think a simple bowl of ramen could have such an effect. Into this scene of culinary reverie burst Issei Hyodo, the club's newest and most boisterous member. He was flushed, his school uniform disheveled, and he carried the manic energy of a teenager who had just successfully peeked into the girls' kendo locker room. "Hey, everyone, Issei-sama is here to brighten your day," he announced, striking a dramatic pose. "So, what are we talking about? My future harem, my meteoric rise to harem king," he faltered when he realized no one was paying him the slightest bit of attention. Rias and Akino were still lost in their memories of the previous night. "What's going on?" Issei asked, his bravado deflating. "Did I miss something?" "We have discovered the most incredible chef, Issei," Rias said, turning her gaze to him. "A young man who runs a food stall in the park. His cooking is simply heavenly," Akino added with a sigh. Issei's brain processed the information. Chef, young man, Rias and Akino swooning. A switch flipped in his head, and his easygoing perversion was replaced by a hot, possessive jealousy. "A chef? You're all acting like this over some guy's noodles," he scoffed, puffing out his chest. "Come on, it's just ramen. How good can it be? I bet he's just some pretty boy who flashed a smile and you all fell for it." Kaneko cracked open a golden eye. "Pervert," she muttered, before returning to her nap. "Hey, it's a valid point," Issei insisted, his voice rising. "Food is cooked with passion. With spirit. I can cook with passion. My manly spirit is second to none. I bet I could make something way better than his stupid ramen." An idea began to form in Rias's mind. A brilliant, multifaceted idea. Her direct approach had failed. Naruto had rejected a formal contract. But he hadn't rejected a challenge. He was a simple, straightforward man. Perhaps a simple, straightforward approach was needed. One that would entangle him with her peerage on a personal level, making him a part of their world whether he had a contract or not. A slow, deliberate smile spread across her face. "Is that so, Issei? You believe your cooking is superior?" "Of course it is," Issei declared, oblivious to the trap being laid. "My soul burns with the fire of 1,000 suns. I'll challenge him. A cook-off. Me versus him. My passion versus his noodles." "A splendid idea," Rias said, her smile widening. "A perfect way to test the true quality of his craft. If you win, you will have proven your point. We will all go tonight. Kiba, you can be an impartial judge. Kaneko, I trust your palate completely." Kiba looked amused. "Of course, President." Kaneko just gave a slight nod, already anticipating another taste of that wonderful food. Issei was ecstatic. This was perfect. He would show up this new guy, defend the honor of his peerage and his future harem, and prove that his passion was the ultimate ingredient. He would be the hero. "All right, let's do this," he yelled, striking another pose. "Tonight, that noodle slinger is going to get a taste of Issei Hyodo's legendary okonomiyaki." That evening, Naruto was enjoying the steady trickle of customers. A few office workers on their way home, a young couple on a date, an old man who had become a regular. He was in his element, the rhythmic work of cooking a soothing meditation. He was just handing a bowl to a customer when he felt a sudden, coordinated surge of energy approaching. It was the two women from last night, but this time, they had brought friends. The Grimoire peerage descended on his stall like a small, strangely assorted army. Rias led the way, looking radiant under the lantern light. Akino glided beside her, her smile as enigmatic as ever. They were followed by a handsome blonde boy with a friendly demeanor, the small white-haired girl from the first night now in human form, a fact that didn't surprise Naruto in the slightest, and a loud, brown-haired boy who radiated an almost comical level of nervous energy and misplaced bravado. There was also a large cardboard box that seemed to be shaking slightly, but Naruto decided not to ask about that. "Good evening," Rias said, her voice smooth. "We're back, and we've brought an appetite." "Welcome," Naruto said, gesturing to the stools. "Plenty to go around." Issei, however, strode forward and slammed a portable griddle and a cooler full of ingredients onto the far end of the counter. I'm not here to eat your food. I'm here to challenge you. Naruto raised an eyebrow. A challenge. A cooking duel, Issei declared, pointing a dramatic finger at him. My manly passion okonomiyaki versus your, whatever it is you make. To prove whose soul burns hotter. Naruto looked from Issei's fiery, ridiculous expression to Rias's coolly calculating one. He saw the game instantly. This was her new angle, her way of pulling him into her orbit. It was clever. It was also, he had to admit, kind of amusing. He hadn't had a good, pointless challenge in a long time. All right, he said with a grin. I accept. What are the stakes? Issei faltered. He hadn't thought that far ahead. The stakes are, the winner gets the girl's respect. And the loser has to admit defeat. Sounds fair. Naruto agreed easily, much to Issei's surprise. The duel began. Issei was a whirlwind of motion and noise. He slapped cabbage and batter onto his griddle with theatrical grunts. Feel the passion. Taste the burning soul of a dragon. He yelled, spritzing cooking oil with a flow. Yurish that nearly set his own sleeve on fire. He talked a big game, narrating his every move, boasting about the perverted power he was infusing into the batter, a comment that earned him a sharp jab in the ribs from Rias. The resulting okonomiyaki was large, slightly charred around the edges, and smothered in a thick layer of sauce and mayonnaise. It was a monument to pure, unfiltered enthusiasm. Naruto, in contrast, was a model of quiet efficiency. He watched Issei's chaotic performance with a patient smile. When it was his turn, he didn't reach for a complex array of ingredients. He simply took out a pot of perfectly cooked, steaming white rice. He set out a few simple fillings. Some grilled, salted salmon he had flaked apart, some sour and salty umeboshi paste, and some seasoned kombu. Wait, that's it, Issei scoffed. You're just making rice balls. That's baby food. My okonomiyaki is a beast. Naruto didn't respond. He dipped his hands in salt water, took a scoop of the warm rice, and began to shape it. His hands moved with a gentle, practiced certainty. There was no wasted motion. It was less like cooking and more like a form of meditation. He wasn't infusing the rice with a burning passion or a desperate ambition. He was channeling something far simpler, and far more powerful, a feeling of calm, satisfying contentment. The feeling of coming home after a long journey. The simple, honest pleasure of a full stomach. He shaped 3 perfect triangles, one with each filling, and placed them on a simple wooden plate. The judging began. Issei proudly presented his okonomiyaki. Kiba took a bite, chewed thoughtfully, and nodded. It's very spirited, Issei. A little heavy on the sauce, but full of your personality. Kaneko took a tiny bite and stated, it's loud. Akano giggled. It certainly has a lot of explosive energy. Then, it was Naruto's turn. He passed the plate of onigiri. Kiba took the one with salmon. He bit into it, and his polite, friendly expression softened into one of genuine, surprised pleasure. The rice was perfectly seasoned, each grain distinct. The salmon was salty and savory. It wasn't complex. It wasn't flashy. It was just right. It was profoundly and deeply satisfying. Kaneko chose the kombu. She nibbled it, and her ears gave a slight, involuntary twitch. It tasted of the earth, of the sea, of simple, nourishing goodness. It was the flavor of quiet contentment. Finally, it was Issei's turn. He snatched the umeboshi-filled onigiri, his expression smug. All right, let's see what this is all about. Probably tastes like nothing. He took a large, arrogant bite. The flavor hit him like a physical blow. First, the perfect warmth of the rice. Then, the simple saltiness that enhanced its natural sweetness. And finally, the sharp, sour, salty burst of the pickled plum in the center, a jolt that woke up his entire palate. But again, it was the feeling that did it. The onigiri didn't scream or boast. It simply satisfied. It was so fundamentally and perfectly fulfilling that it momentarily extinguished the roaring bonfire of his lecherous ambitions, his jealousy, and his desperate need for attention. All the noise in his head went quiet. For a single, crystal-clear moment, he wasn't the Red Dragon Emperor or the aspiring harem king. He was just a boy, eating a rice ball, and feeling completely, utterly content. He stood there, his mouth half open, The bite of onigiri dissolving on his tongue. He was speechless. He had come with fire and fury and had been defeated by rice. By a simple, honest meal that was so much more confident in its own quiet perfection than his okonomiyaki could ever be. He looked at Naruto, who was just watching him with a patient, knowing smile. There was no gloating in his eyes. No, I told you so. There was just a quiet understanding. Issei stammered, his cheeks flushing a deep red. I lose. Rias Gramori smiled. Her gamble had paid off spectacularly. Naruto was still not under contract. He was not a member of her peerage. But he was no longer a stranger. He had competed with them, fed them, and thoroughly humbled her pawn. He was, inextricably, a part of their world now. As the group stood in a stunned but comfortable silence, none of them noticed the brief news report playing on a small television in a nearby closed electronics store. It spoke of a bizarre incident at the Kuo docks, where a stray devil, a creature known for its malicious chaos, had been found and exorcised. The strange part, the reporter noted, was that the devil had ignored everything around it, instead trying to chew its way through a solid steel shipping container. The exorcist on the scene had described the creature's aura as having a single, overriding signature, a gnawing, desperate, and utterly insatiable hunger. Chapter 2 End. Chapter 3. The Scent of Heaven and the Fallen. The world had become a kaleidoscope of gray, lonely streets for Asia Argento. Each face that passed was indifferent, a blur of motion that only served to highlight her own stillness, her own isolation. Exiled from the church, branded a heretic for the simple, compassionate act of healing a devil, she was adrift in a world that no longer had a place for her. The God she had devoted her life to was silent. The people she had called her family had cast her out. All she had left was a hollow ache in her chest and the gnawing pangs of an empty stomach. She wandered the darkening streets of Kuo town with no destination, clutching the worn strap of her travel bag. Every shadow seemed to hold a threat, every distant laugh felt like a mockery. She was tired, so deeply, bone-achingly tired. It was then that a scent found her, cutting through the smog of the city and the fog of her despair. It was a gentle aroma, not demanding or overwhelming. It was warm, savory, and impossibly kind. It smelled of safety. It was a scent that promised a warm fire, a soft blanket, and a gentle hand on a fevered brow. It was the scent of a prayer she hadn't even dared to whisper, and it pulled her forward, her weary feet moving on their own accord. Her steps led her to the quiet corner of a park, to a small, brightly lit food stall under a large tree. Behind the counter stood a young man with hair the color of sunshine and eyes the color of the sky on a perfect summer day. He was serving an elderly couple, and the smile he gave them was so genuine, so full of unreserved warmth, that it made Asia's heart ache with a strange mix of envy and hope. She watched from the shadows, too timid to approach. When the couple left, the young man began cleaning. His movements calm and purposeful. He looked up, and his blue eyes met hers across the distance. She flinched, expecting him to shoo her away, to see her as the vagrant she had become. But he didn't. He just smiled that same warm smile. "Hey," he called out, his voice gentle. "You look like you could use something warm. Come on, first bowl's on the house." The simple, unconditional offer of kindness was so unexpected it brought tears to her eyes. Hesitantly, she shuffled forward and took a seat at the edge of the counter, keeping her head bowed, her silver blonde hair hiding her face. She couldn't remember the last time someone had looked at her without pity or suspicion. Naruto didn't ask questions. He didn't ask for her name, where she came from, or why a girl who radiated such a profound, gentle sadness was all alone at night. He had seen that look before. He had worn it himself for most of his childhood. He knew that what she needed wasn't an interrogation. It was a simple act of human connection. He turned to his pots and pans. He didn't make her ramen. That was a dish of bold, fulfilling flavors. This girl needed something different. He worked quickly, ladling a clear, chicken-based broth into a smaller pot. He added finely sliced ginger, a spoonful of cooked rice, and a swirl of beaten egg that blossomed into delicate ribbons in the hot liquid. He finished it with a sprinkle of finely chopped green onions. It was zosui, a simple, restorative rice soup. A dish meant to heal. He placed the steaming bowl in front of her. "Here you go," he said softly. "Be careful, It's hot. Quote. Asia stared at the soup. The aroma was delicate, clean, and profoundly comforting. It was the scent of pure, unadulterated care. With a trembling hand, she picked up the spoon and took a small, tentative sip. The warmth spread through her instantly, chasing away the chill that had settled deep in her bones. The flavor was gentle, a perfect balance of savory chicken, the mild bite of ginger, and the comforting softness of the rice and egg. But like all of Naruto's cooking, the true impact was in the feeling. The soup tasted of acceptance. It was the taste of a hand reaching out in the dark. Not to judge or to save, but simply to hold. It was the warmth of unconditional kindness, a purity of intent that rivaled the holiest water she had ever handled. It bypassed her pain, her fear, her heartbreak over the god who had abandoned her, and spoke directly to the lonely child within. It didn't offer salvation or absolution. It offered something far more. Precious and immediate. A moment of peace. The tears she had been holding back for days finally fell, plopping silently into the golden broth. They weren't tears of sadness anymore, but of overwhelming, cathartic relief. She ate the rest of the soup in a silent, reverent haze, each spoonful a balm on her wounded soul. When she was finished, the gnawing emptiness in her stomach was gone, but more importantly, the crushing weight on her heart felt just a little bit lighter. Thank you, she whispered, her voice thick with emotion as she looked up at him for the first time. Naruto just nodded, his expression kind. Everyone needs a hot meal. He saw the travel bag, the worn-out shoes, the way she clutched her clothes. He saw a person with nowhere to go. Look, he said, leaning on the counter. It's not much, but I could use some help around here. Washing dishes, prepping vegetables. I can pay you a little, and you can eat all you want. If you need a place to stay, there's a small shrine. Not far from here that's been abandoned for years. It's quiet and dry. Asia stared at him, her large green eyes wide with disbelief. A job, a place to stay. This stranger, this boy with the sun in his smile, was offering her a lifeline without asking for anything in return. But, why? She asked, her voice barely audible. You don't even know me. I know you were hungry, Naruto replied with a shrug, as if it were the simplest, most logical thing in the world. Is that a yes? For the second time that night, Asia Argento cried. But this time, she was smiling. Yes, she choked out. Thank you. Yes. A few days later, a new, gentle rhythm had established itself at the stall. Asia, now with a safe place to sleep and a purpose to her day, was a diligent and grateful helper. She washed WLS with meticulous care and learned to chop scallions with a focused determination. Her presence was a quiet, calming one, and for the first time since arriving in this strange world, Naruto felt like he had a friend. This newfound equilibrium was about to be tested. Two figures approached the stall, walking with the unmistakable, purposeful stride of soldiers. One was a young woman with dark blue hair cut in a short, practical bob. She wore a stern, focused expression and carried a massive sword wrapped in cloth on her back. The other was a girl with light brown hair tied in twintails, her demeanor brighter and more energetic, but with a similar undercurrent of trained discipline. Zenobia Quarta and Irina Shido, wielders of the fragments of Excalibur, had arrived in Kuo on a mission own the church, to retrieve the stolen pieces of their holy sword. Their investigation had led them to Kuo Academy, a known den of devils. While scouting the town, they had detected two distinct energies that troubled them. The first was the lingering holy aura of a former saint, Asia Argento. The second was a bizarre, pure, and potent energy signature emanating from this very spot, an energy that felt almost divine, yet was unaligned with heaven. To find the two anomalies in the same place was a cause for high alert. They stopped before the counter, Zenovia's sharp blue eyes immediately locking onto Asia. You, she said, her voice sharp and accusatory. Asia Argento, the heretic. We were told you were in this town. Asia flinched as if struck, dropping the bowl she was drying. It clattered on the wooden counter but didn't break. The old fear, the shame of her exile, came rushing back. Before she could respond, Naruto stepped forward, placing himself slightly in front of her. He looked at the two newcomers. His expression no longer smiling, but calm and unyielding. She works for me, he said, his voice even. Is there a problem? Zenovia's gaze shifted to him. She sized him up. A human, no discernible power level. Yet he stood his ground against two armed warriors without a flicker of fear. The problem, she said, her tone clipped, is that a former servant of the church is associating with a power we cannot identify in territory controlled by devils. We are here for answers. Wow, Zenovia, maybe be a little less intense. Irina whispered, nudging her partner. She gave Naruto and Asia a bright, apologetic smile. Sorry about her. She's all business. We just have some questions. We're on a mission from, our employers, and we need to understand what's going on in this town. Naruto studied them. He recognized their type instantly. They were shinobi, in a sense. Tools of a village, utterly devoted to their mission, their beliefs carved into them like stone. He knew arguing with that kind of faith was pointless. You couldn't tell them they were wrong. You had to show them. I don't know anything about devils or missions, he said honestly. I just run a food stall. And Asia is my friend. He turned his head slightly. Asia, go take a break in the back. Grateful, Asia scurried away, leaving Naruto to face the two holy sword wielders alone. Look, he said, turning back to them. His friendly demeanor returning. You've walked a long way. You look hungry. How about you sit down, have a bite to eat, and then we can talk. My treat. Zenovia narrowed her eyes, suspicious of the offer. Are you trying to bribe us? No, Naruto said with a laugh. I'm trying to feed you. It's what I do. Irina's stomach chose that moment to let out a loud, embarrassing growl. Her cheeks flushed bright red. Well, she said sheepishly. Maybe just a little bite. Zenovia sighed in exasperation but didn't protest. A fed soldier was a better soldier, after all. They took their seats, the massive durandal still resting on Zenovia's back. Naruto decided on something simple, yet symbolic. He grilled 2 thick slices of country bread, rubbing them with garlic and olive oil. He topped one with fresh, diced tomatoes and basil, and the other with sautéed wild mushrooms. Bruschetta, simple, honest, and made with the fruits of the earth. He placed the plates in front of them. Irina, ever the more enthusiastic of the two, took a bite of the tomato bruschetta first. Her eyes lit up. The bread was perfectly crisp, the tomatoes burst with a sun-ripened sweetness, and the garlic and basil sang a vibrant, joyful chorus. The flavor was pure, unadulterated delight. It tasted of her faith. Not the rigid dogma or the bloody battles, but the simple, beautiful, childhood joy of it. It was the taste of singing in a choir, of believing in heroes, of the unwavering conviction that good would always triumph over evil. It was a taste of pure, happy nostalgia. Zenovia, more cautious, took a bite of the mushroom bruschetta. Her experience was different. The flavor was deep, earthy, and complex. It tasted of strength, of resilience, of something that grew in the dark and drew its power from the unyielding earth. It tasted of her sword, durandal. It was the taste of an unwavering purpose, of a conviction so absolute it became a law of nature. It was the flavor of a solemn vow, of the heavy, satisfying weight of a sacred duty fulfilled. It was a powerful, grounding affirmation of the path she had chosen. They both finished their food in a stunned silence. The experience was profoundly disorienting. The food hadn't felt just good, it had felt righteous. It had resonated with the very core of their holy missions. Yet the man who made it stood there, calmly wiping down his counter. Having just defended a heretic and seemingly unconcerned by their affiliation with the church. How? Zenovia began, her voice losing its hard edge, replaced by a genuine confusion. What was that? The food, it felt holy. Naruto finished for her, a small, knowing smile on his face. He looked from her to Irina. Does kindness have to belong to one side? Does a good meal have to be blessed to be good for the soul? I just cook. What you feel from it, that comes from you. His words struck a chord, creating a paradox that their training had not prepared them for. Their world was one of absolutes, light and dark, holy and profane, us and them. This man and his cooking suggested a different reality, one where strength, kindness, and even a sense of divinity could exist outside the rigid structures they had built their lives around. He wasn't a heretic using dark arts. He was something else entirely. Something their rulebook had no entry for. Zenovia stood up, her mind a whirlwind of conflicting thoughts. "This changes nothing about our mission," she stated, though her voice lacked its earlier conviction. "But, thank you for the meal. It was edifying. Come back anytime," Naruto offered genuinely. As they walked away, Irina looked back at the stall, at the boy with the sunny hair and the quiet, silver-haired girl who had peeked out from the back, looking much happier than she had when they arrived. "He's strange, isn't he?" Irina said. "The food felt like a blessing from an angel, but he talks about devils and heretics like they're just people." "He's an anomaly," Zenobia corrected, her hand resting on the hilt of her sword. "And a dangerous one. He has the power to shake a person's faith to its very foundations without even trying." She paused, her expression troubled. "We will need to keep a close eye on him." Far from the quiet park in Kuo, in the heart of the fallen angel territory of Grigori, a screen flickered to life. It displayed a topographical map of a Japanese town, a pulsating golden star of energy shining brightly at its center. Azazel, the Governor-General of the Fallen Angels, leaned back in his chair, a cup of instant noodles in his hand. He was dressed in a casual aloha shirt, looking more like a washed-up beach bum than the leader of one of the world's great powers. He took a long, noisy slurp of his noodles and stared at the screen, a single black wing twitching in interest. His researchers had been tracking this energy signature for weeks. It wasn't demonic, angelic, draconic, or related to any known sacred gear. It was a complete unknown, which, to a research-obsessed maniac like Azazel, was the most exciting thing in the world. It was pure, unbelievably potent, and seemed to fluctuate in concert with mealtimes. "What do you make of it, Shemhazai?" he asked his second-in-command without taking his eyes off the screen. "It is an enigma, Governor," the more serious fallen angel replied, studying a data slate. "Its output is stable, yet it causes emotional and spiritual resonance in those who come into contact with it. The devils in the area are circling it, and now we have reports that the church's exorcists have made contact. It is becoming a focal point." Azazel took another slurp of noodles and made a face. It tasted like salty cardboard. He looked back at the golden star on his screen, a beacon of pure, tantalizing energy. An energy that, his senses told him, would probably taste incredible. "A focal point, Azazel said, a wide, wolfish grin spreading across his face. He tossed his empty no-odal cup into a bin overflowing with similar containers. "Well then, I think it's high time I went on a little field trip. An anomaly this interesting deserves a personal touch." His curiosity was piqued, and when Azazel's curiosity was piqued, things were about to get very interesting, and very chaotic, for everyone involved. Chapter 3 End. Chapter 4. A Feast for Crows and Dragons. The night air in Kuo had a particular quality. A hum of latent power that was imperceptible to humans but a constant thrum to supernatural beings. Tonight, that hum was different. It was distorted, stretched taut by the arrival of an immense, oppressive pressure that made the very shadows feel heavy. Azazel, Governor-General of the Grigori, strolled into the park as if he were heading to a beach party. He wore a ridiculously loud floral shirt, cargo shorts, and a pair of sandals. Flanking him, however, were figures that utterly contradicted his casual demeanor. To his right was Shemhazai, his second-in-command, his face a mask of stern vigilance. To his left was a powerfully built man with black hair and a perpetual scowl, his aura crackling with contained lightning. Barakiel, a Kadri-class fallen angel and a war hero, looked deeply uncomfortable to be on such a mundane errand. "Are you certain this is the place, Azazel?" Barakiel's voice was a low rumble, like distant thunder. "It smells of soup." "Oh, it's the place, all right," Azazel said, a grin of pure, unadulterated curiosity spreading across his face. He could feel it. The golden energy signature his sensors had been tracking for weeks was pouring out of the small, unassuming food stall under the ginkgo tree. It was even more potent in person, a gentle, welcoming power that felt utterly alien. He had spent millennia studying sacred gears, the divine systems of God, and the complex magics of the world. This felt like none of them. This felt new. They approached the stall just as Naruto was handing a bowl of ramen to Asia. He looked up at their approach, his senses tingling. These weren't devils. The power was different. Darker, certainly, but laced with a faint, lingering echo of something holy, like a bell that had been torn. Isht but still remembered its original tone. And their leader, the man in the garish shirt, possessed a power that made the air itself seem to warp around him. It was immense, ancient, and terrifyingly sharp. Evenin, Azazel called out cheerfully, plopping down onto a stool with a complete lack of ceremony. Don't mind us. We're just some weary travelers who followed our noses to this delightful-looking establishment. 3 bowls of whatever you're making, chef. Naruto studied him. The man's eyes, despite his relaxed posture, were incredibly sharp and intelligent, dissecting everything they saw. This was not a man to be underestimated. Coming right up, he said, his tone even and welcoming. He prepared 3 bowls of his signature tonkatsu ramen. As he worked, he could feel the fallen angel's gazes on him. The stern one was analyzing his movements, his technique. The brooding, powerful one was staring at him with a strange, conflicted intensity. And the one in the lead was watching him with the focused glee of a child about to open a long-awaited present. He placed the bowls before them. Shemhazai merely nodded, his expression unreadable as he picked up his spoon. Barakiel stared down at the bowl, his expression thunderous. Azazel, however, leaned over his bowl, closed his eyes, and inhaled the steam with the reverence of a wine connoisseur. Remarkable, he murmured. The energy composition is flawless. It's not an overlay, not an enchantment, it's integrated. Fused at a conceptual level. He picked up his spoon, his grin widening. Time for the primary analysis. He took a sip. The universe, for Azazel, was a grand, interconnected system of laws and principles. He perceived the world through the lens of research, data, and potential. What he tasted in that broth was not an emotion, but an idea. It was the taste of boundless, unending innovation. It was the exhilarating thrill of a breakthrough in the lab, the spark of a new invention that could change the world. It was the elegant, beautiful logic of a perfectly designed system. He could taste the potential for new sacred gears, for new forms of magic, for technologies he had only dreamed of. The ramen was a liquid blueprint of creation itself. A flavor that spoke directly to his soul's deepest, most fundamental desire. To learn, to create, to understand. He felt a giddy, almost manic laugh bubble up in his chest. A simple human cook had created a phenomenon that defied every known law of theology and physics. This was better than discovering a new Longinus. This was better than anything. Beside him, Barakiel also took a sip. His reaction was vastly different. The scowl that was etched onto his face softened. The storm in his aura calmed. For a single, heart-stopping moment, he wasn't a fallen angel cadre. A warrior stained by millennia of conflict. He was a young man again, sitting in a small, sunlit kitchen. He could smell the scent of baking bread and hear the sound of a woman's gentle laughter. The ramen tasted of a peace he thought he had lost forever, the warmth of a home and a love that had been stolen from him. It was the taste of his human wife, Shuri. The memory was so vivid, so painful and so beautiful, that his hand trembled, and he had to set his spoon down before he crushed it. He stared into the bowl, his dark eyes shimmering with an unshed emotion he hadn't allowed himself to feel in centuries. Before anyone could speak, another wave of energy descended on the park, this one arrogant and fiery. A swirling vortex of orange flames erupted 20 feet from the stall. And from it emerged a dozen figures. At their head was a handsome young man with short blonde hair and a smug, aristocratic bearing. He was dressed in opulent red and gold clothing, and a pair of fiery wings flared behind him. Riser Phoenix had arrived, and he had brought his entire peerage. Rias. His voice boomed, full of possessive arrogance. He ignored the fallen angels completely. His eyes locked on the front door of the nearby Occult Research Club building, from which Rias and her peerage were now emerging, drawn by the commotion. Riser has grown tired of waiting. Your little holiday in the human world is over. We are returning to the underworld to finalize our wedding arrangements. Now. Rias Grimori stepped forward, her crimson hair flowing around her, her expression one of cold fury. Riser, I have told you before. I will not marry you. Your feelings are irrelevant, Riser sneered, making a dismissive gesture. The union between the houses of Grimori and Phoenix has been decided. You will do your duty. Now, gather your servants and come. It was at that moment that Azazel chose to clear his throat, a loud, attention-grabbing sound. He set his bowl down, a look of genuine annoyance on his face. "Excuse me," he said, turning on his stool. "I don't know who you are, Flame Brain, but you're interrupting my meal." And I was just getting to the good part. Riser's gaze finally shifted to the stall. His eyes widened slightly as he recognized Azazel, then narrowed in contempt as he took in his ridiculous attire and the human cook standing beside him. "Governor Azazel, what a surprise to see you slumming it in the human world. Have you taken to dining with insects?" He gestured disdainfully at Naruto. Naruto, who had been called far worse things by far more impressive people, simply continued to wipe down his counter. "This insect just served me the most interesting thing I've experienced in 1,000 years, Azazel shot back, his playful demeanor gone, replaced by a dangerous glint in his eyes. Which is more than I can say for the Phoenix clan's contributions to anything lately. Now, as I was saying, you're being rude." The tension in the park skyrocketed. The heir to a great devil family was facing off against the leader of the fallen angels, with the Grimoire peerage caught in the middle. Rias saw her chance. Riser was arrogant and predictable. Azazel was a chaotic variable. She could use this. "There is nothing to discuss, Riser," she said, her voice ringing with a newfound confidence. Naruto's quiet refusal of her offer, his simple strength, had inspired her. She would not be a pawn. "My peerage and I are more than capable of handling our own affairs." Riser laughed, a harsh, grating sound. "Your peerage, this pathetic collection of strays. My peerage is a full set of 15, all of whom have fought in numerous raiding games. They would crush your little family in minutes. Is that a challenge?" Issei yelled, stepping forward, his boosted gear glowing on his arm. "It is a fact," Riser sneered. "A formal raiding game would be a bad idea right now," Azazel mused aloud, tapping his chin. "Too many political implications, what with me being here. It would look like I was endorsing one side. Very messy." He looked from Riser's fuming face to Rias's determined one. "However, a smaller, unofficial skirmish, just to test the facts." Riser seized on the idea. A chance to humiliate Rias and her weak servants in front of the fallen angel leader. It was perfect. "Fine," he spat. "My peerage against yours. Here and now. No holding back. When your pathetic team is broken and begging, you will come with me without another word of protest, Rias. And if we win," Rias countered, her eyes flashing, "you will leave Kuo and not return until the agreed-upon date." "An impossible outcome," Riser scoffed. "Agreed." An arena of fiery energy instantly erupted around the park, a barrier of Phoenix magic that sealed them all inside. Riser's peerage spread out, their faces confident and cruel. Rias's peerage gathered together, their expressions grim but determined. They were outnumbered and outexperienced. "Wait," a calm voice cut through the tension. Everyone turned. Naruto was holding a tray laden with steaming bowls. He walked towards the Grimoire peerage, completely ignoring the shimmering wall of fire and the murderous glares from the Phoenix clan. "You can't fight on an empty stomach," he said simply, handing a bowl to each of them. "It's onigiri chizuke, rice balls in a hot dashi broth. Good for focus." Issei looked down at the bowl. It was so simple, so profoundly out of place on a battlefield. "Dude, we're about to fight for our lives. All the more reason to eat," Naruto said, giving him a reassuring grin. "Trust me." Rias looked at the bowl, then at Naruto's calm, steady eyes. She nodded to her peerage. "Eat." They ate quickly, a strange, quiet ritual in the heart of the growing storm. The meal was warm, savory, and light. It didn't fill them with a raging power, but something far more effective. The broth tasted of crystal clear focus. The rice tasted of unshakable teamwork. The simple seasonings tasted of quiet, unwavering resolve. It settled their nerves, sharpened their senses, and topped off their spiritual energy reserves. When they finished, they felt ready. They were still outnumbered, but they felt like a single, cohesive unit. "Begin!" Riser roared. The battle exploded. Riser's peerage moved with practiced, ruthless efficiency. His knights, a pair of twins, blurred forward, aiming to take out Kiba. His rooks formed a wall of flesh to intercept Kaneko. His bishops began chanting powerful, long-range spells. But the Grimoire team was different. They were faster, sharper, more in sync than they had ever been. Kiba didn't just meet the knights. He moved with a preternatural grace, his sword birth creating a dazzling web of blades that forced them on the defensive. Kaneko, instead of punching through the rooks, dodged under their clumsy charge, her movements economical and precise, and landed a devastating blow on one of Riser's bishops, taking her out of the fight instantly. Issei, his mind clear and free of its usual perverted distractions, felt the boosted gear respond to his will like never before. Boost, boost, boost. The familiar cry echoed, his power doubling with incredible speed. He channeled the energy not into a wild, unfocused blast, but a concentrated beam that intercepted a massive fireball aimed at Asia. The most dramatic change was with Akeno. She faced off against Yubeluna, Riser's queen and a powerful mage in her own right. Yubeluna fought with a strange, desperate ferocity. Her attacks were powerful but reckless, her eyes holding a glint of something wild and ravenous. She overextended, launching a massive bomb of cursed energy, leaving herself momentarily open. It was a tiny window, one Akeno might have missed before. But now, her mind was a placid lake of focus. She saw the opening, and a bolt of holy lightning, a perfect fusion of her two heritages, slammed into Yubeluna, causing the other woman to cry out and fall back, defeated. As Yubeluna lay on the ground, she clutched her stomach, a gnawing, inexplicable hunger twisting in her gut, a hunger that had made her sloppy, made her lose. The battle raged, and while the Grimoire team took hits, they gave as good as they got. They fought with a synergy that baffled Riser's peerage. It wasn't that they had suddenly become stronger, they had become smarter, more efficient, more together. They fought Riser's experienced, full-set peerage to a complete, unbelievable standstill. The fiery barrier wavered and fell as Riser, his face a mask of incandescent rage and disbelief, called a halt. His peerage was battered, and several members, including his queen, had been eliminated. Rias's team was bruised and breathing heavily, but they were all still standing. Impossible, Riser shrieked. How could my elite guards be matched by this trash? Azazel let out a low whistle from the sidelines, his bowl of ramen now empty. Not trash, he said, a look of profound fascination on his face. He wasn't looking at the fighters. He was looking at Naruto, who was calmly collecting the empty bowls. That's what you call a support class of a completely different dimension. He didn't just heal them, he optimized them. The political landscape of the supernatural world had just tilted on its axis, not because of a new weapon or a secret treaty, but because of a human chef and a bowl of rice soup. Riser was humiliated, Rias had won a crucial victory, and Azazel had just discovered his new favorite research project. And Naruto Uzumaki, the cause of it all, simply STA. CKED the bowls and began to plan for tomorrow. He was thinking of trying a miso broth for a change. Chapter 4 End. Chapter 5. The Taste of a Promise. The silence that descended after the fiery barrier of the Phoenix clan dissipated was heavier than any sound. Riser's peerage, battered and humiliated, gathered their fallen members and vanished in a vortex of resentful flames. Riser himself gave Rias a look of pure, venomous hatred before disappearing, his arrogant threats ringing hollow in the face of his public failure. Azazel was the next to leave, though his departure was far more amiable. He stretched, yawned, and gave Naruto a look that was equal parts scientific curiosity and sheer delight. Well, that was the best dinner and a show I've had in centuries, he declared, tossing a small, heavy pouch of gold coins onto the counter. This is for the meal, and a retainer. I'll be back. I have about 1,000 questions for you, chef. With a lazy wave and a final, appraising glance, he and his stern-faced entourage vanished into the night, leaving behind the scent of ozone and the lingering promise of future chaos. The Grimoire peerage was left alone in the quiet, battle-scarred park. They stood amidst the scorch marks and cracked pavement, a tangible sense of disbelief hanging over them. They had faced a full, experienced peerage and had not broken. They had not just survived, they had fought them to a standstill. We did it, Issei breathed, his boosted gear finally fading from his arm. The adrenaline was wearing off, leaving a profound, buzzing exhaustion in its wake. We did, Kiba said, a rare, wide smile on his face as he helped a bruised Kaneko to her feet. Rias looked at her family, her nakama, and a fierce, protective pride swelled in her chest. They had been magnificent, but she knew, with a certainty that settled deep in her bones, that the true turning point of the battle had not been a demonic spell or a sacred gear's power, but a simple bowl of rice soup. Her gaze found Naruto, who was already picking up a discarded wrapper, his demeanor as calm as if he had just catered a picnic. He was the variable, the impossible ace up her sleeve, and he was a complete, utter mystery. The victory, however, was not without consequence. News traveled fast in the underworld, a place that ran on gossip and political maneuvering. The story of the draw spread like wildfire. But the narrative was twisted. The official report from the Phoenix clan was that they were ambushed, that Rias had used a forbidden human artifact to artificially enhance her peerage. They demanded a formal, televised rating game to settle the matter and restore their honor. A few days later, Rias sat in the clubroom, a magical communication circle glowing on the floor before her. The holographic image of her brother, Sears Lucifer, shimmered in the air. His expression was not angry, but one of deep, thoughtful curiosity. And the Phoenix family is, of course, apoplectic, Sears was saying. His voice calm and measured. They are painting you as a cheat, Rias. But I know you, and I have seen the reports from Graphia's reconnaissance. Your peerage's power output did not spike. Their energy signatures remained stable. Instead, their coordination, focus, and efficiency increased by a factor of 10. It was, by all accounts, a perfect display of strategy and synergy. Tell me, little sister, what changed? Rias hesitated. To reveal Naruto's existence on this scale was to paint a massive target on his back. He was a human who could influence supernatural beings on a fundamental level. Every faction, every power-hungry lord in the underworld would want a piece of him. He would be dissected, imprisoned, or forced into servitude. He had turned her down when she offered him patronage. She would not betray that by selling him out now. We have been training, brother, she said, her voice a careful blend of confidence and deflection. We have a new regimen. A new diet. It has improved our focus. Sears raised an eyebrow, a small smile playing on his lips. He knew she was holding something back, but he didn't press. I see. A new diet, he repeated, savoring the absurdity of the phrase. Well, whatever it is, it has given us leverage. I can hold off the Phoenix clan's demands for a formal game for now. But they will not be silenced forever. You have bought yourself time, Rias. Use it wisely. I am very interested to see what you and your diet will do next. The communication circle faded, leaving Rias alone with her thoughts. She had bought time, but she had also raised the stakes. The next time she faced Riser, it would be in a formal arena, with the eyes of the entire underworld upon them. She needed to understand the source of her newfound advantage. She needed to understand Naruto Uzumaki. That evening, she went to his stall alone. There were no pretenses of being a king or a politician. She wore simple human clothes, her fiery crimson hair tied back. Naruto was serving a few customers, and Asia was happily drying bowls beside him. Rias waited patiently until he was finished. Naruto, she said, her voice softer than he had ever heard it. He turned, and the easy, welcoming smile he gave her made her heart do a strange, little flutter. Rias, back so soon? The usual. No, she said, shaking her head. I came to ask for a favor. I want you to cook for me. Just for me. Not as a client, but, as a friend. I want to understand you. The request hung in the air. He saw the sincerity in her eyes, the genuine desire for connection. Beneath the layers of aristocracy and demonic power, he saw the weight she was carrying on her shoulders. It was a familiar weight. Okay, he said simply. But not here. This is for customers. Let's go somewhere quiet. He packed a small bag with a few ingredients and a portable grill. He led her away from the park, through the sleeping streets, to a small hill on the outskirts of town that overlooked the sea of city lights. They sat on the cool grass, a comfortable silence between them as he set up his small grill. He didn't make ramen. He didn't make anything fancy. He took out 2 whole, fresh mackerel, salted them, and placed them on the grill. He had a pot of perfectly steamed rice and a small container of miso paste which he mixed with hot water and some tofu cubes. It was the simplest of meals. The kind of meal the third Hokage had sometimes shared with him in his small, lonely apartment. A meal that tasted of simple, unpretentious care. Why did you help us? Rias asked quietly, watching his hands as he expertly tended to the fish. You needed help, Naruto answered, not looking up. Your friends were about to get into a fight they might not win. I don't like seeing that. It's not that simple. You've met devils, fallen angels, exorcists, you don't seem to care who is who. You treat everyone the same. Are you all that different? He countered, finally turning to look at her. His blue eyes illuminated by the glow of the coals. You all get hungry. You all have people you care about. You all have things you're fighting for. The rest is just uniforms. He served the meal on 2 simple plates. The grilled fish was fragrant, its skin crisp and salty, its flesh flaky and moist. The miso soup was a comforting, savory warmth. The rice was a bed of perfect, fluffy contentment. Rias took a bite of the fish. And she saw him. It wasn't a vision. It wasn't a memory. It was a feeling, a flash of profound, empathetic understanding that bloomed behind her eyes. She saw a small boy with bright blonde hair sitting alone on a swing set, watching other children play, his eyes filled with a loneliness so deep it was a physical ache. She felt the sting of a thrown rock, the venom of a hateful word, and the defiant, tear-streaked grin of a pariah who refused to be broken. She took a sip of the miso soup. She felt the warmth of a hand on that boy's head. The taste of tea, he first bowl of ramen ever bought for him, not out of pity, but out of recognition. She felt the fierce, protective bond with a teacher who was the first to see the person, not the demon. The flavor was of a connection so powerful it could change a world. She took a bite of the rice. She felt the crushing weight of a friend's betrayal, the cold finality of a master's death, the searing pain of a world at war. And beneath it all, an unbreakable, unbending will. A promise to carry all that pain, all that hatred, and never, ever give up. It was too much. The sheer emotional weight of his life, his struggles, his triumphs, all conveyed in a simple meal, was overwhelming. A single tear escaped her eye and traced a path down her cheek. She wasn't just eating food. She was bearing witness to his soul. Naruto, she whispered, her voice choked. How can you still smile? Because if I don't, he said, looking out at the city lights, his own voice quiet, then they win. The people who think hatred is stronger than anything else. I can't let them win. The dam of her own composure broke. In that moment of shared vulnerability, she told him everything. Not as the heiress Grimori making a political statement, but as Rias, a young woman trapped in a cage. She spoke of the forced engagement to Riser, a man she despised. She spoke of the crushing pressure of her family name, the expectation that she would be a broodmare to produce a pure-blooded heir. She spoke of her fear that she would never be loved for who she was, only for what she represented. He listened. He didn't offer solutions or platitudes. He just listened, his presence a calm, steady anchor in the storm of her confession. When she was finished, her words hanging in the cool night air, he simply pushed the plate of rice a little closer to her. You're not a pawn, Rias, he said softly. You're a king. You lead your friends. You protect them. That's not a duty someone gives you. That's a choice you make. And it's the only choice that matters. In his simple words, she found a profound truth. He wasn't seeing her title, her power, or her name. He was seeing her, and in that moment, on a quiet hill overlooking the city, a bond was forged. Not by magic, not by demonic contracts, but by a shared meal and a shared understanding of a lonely heart. From the window of the Occult Research Club building, Akano Himahima watched the 2 figures on the distant hill. She couldn't hear their words, but she could see the intimacy of the scene, the small fire, the shared meal, the way Rias's posture, usually so regal and guarded, had softened and become vulnerable. A strange, complex emotion twisted in her gut. She was happy for Rias. Her king, her best friend, was finding a new kind of strength, a new source of hope. But there was another feeling, a sharp, possessive pang of jealousy that took her by surprise. Naruto's cooking hadn't just been a pleasant meal for her. It had been a moment of absolution, a taste of peace that had quieted the raging storm of her dual heritage. It was a deeply personal, intimate experience. To see him sharing that, to see him forging a connection that deep with someone else, it hurt in a way she didn't understand. It brought her own pain to the surface. The pain of being Barakiel's daughter, the child of a fallen angel and a human priestess. The shame and self-loathing that he hid behind her sultry smiles and sadistic tendencies. She had seen her father at the stall, had seen the way Naruto's food had broken through his hardened shell. It was all connected, all tangled up in this strange, kind, powerful boy who had appeared out of nowhere. She couldn't stand it. Driven by an impulse she didn't bother to analyze, she left the clubhouse. Later that night, long after Rias had gone home, Naruto was cleaning his stall, preparing to close. "You're working late." He looked up. Akano was standing there, out of the shadows. Her usual teasing smile was gone, replaced by a quiet, vulnerable expression he had never seen before. Her hair was down, and in the soft lantern light, she looked younger, less like the fearsome priestess of thunder and more like a girl carrying a heavy burden. "Can't sleep," he said. My mind is too loud," she admitted, taking a seat at the counter. She didn't flirt or tease. She just looked at him, her violet eyes full of a deep, unspoken sorrow. Would you cook for me?" Naruto studied her face, sensing the storm of conflict within. He nodded slowly. He didn't ask what she wanted. He felt he already knew. He moved around his stall, taking out ingredients. He started with a base of sweet, sticky rice. To this, he added the dark, savory flavor of unagi that had been grilled in a thick, sweet soy sauce. He wrapped it in a perfectly thin, golden sheet of tamagoyaki, a sweet, rolled omelet. A dish of contrasts, sweet and savory, light and dark, the warmth of the rice and the richness of the eel, all held together by the gentle sweetness of the egg. He placed it in front of her. "Kinshi don," he said softly. Akano picked up her chopsticks. She took a bite. The flavors flooded her senses. The sweetness of the egg and the sauce was a comforting embrace. The taste of her mother's love, of her human heritage. The dark, rich, savory flavor of the grilled eel was not a taste of sin or shame, but of a deep, powerful strength. The taste of her father's lightning, of her fallen angel blood. In Naruto's dish, these two opposing forces were not at war. They were in harmony. They complemented each other, elevated each other, creating a flavor that was more complex and beautiful than either could be alone. The food tasted of balance. It tasted of acceptance. It tasted of a world where she didn't have to choose between being a devil or an angel. Where she could simply be Akano, a perfect and beautiful fusion of both. She ate the entire bowl without a word, tears streaming silently down her face. They were not tears of sadness, but of a release so profound it left her breathless. He hadn't healed her. He had shown her that she didn't need to be healed. She needed to be whole. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice thick with unshed emotion. "Anytime," he replied. In the mist-shrouded mountains miles away from the neon glow of Kuo, a small, forgotten shrine lay hidden, its wood rotted, its stone steps covered in moss. For 1,000 years, it had been a prison, its powerful seals holding a minor deity, a god of the harvest who had grown greedy and become a god of gluttony, a devourer of offerings. Tonight, a new power seeped into the ancient stones. A whisper from the void, a tendril of cosmic, insatiable hunger. The Gyula had been searching for a vessel, a pawn with a natural affinity for its purpose. It found one here. The seals on the shrine began to glow with a sickly, purple light. Cracks spread across the stone torii gate. A low, guttural moan echoed from within, a sound of a stomach that had been empty for a millennium. The dark energy of the Gyula poured into the slumbering god, not possessing it, but empowering it, twisting its divine nature into something monstrous. The shrine doors burst open. A shadowy form, vaguely humanoid but with a gaping, tooth-filled maw where its face should be, emerged. It sniffed the air, its head turning, searching. It could sense it. It could taste it on the wind. A faint but irresistible flavor. A divine flavor. A flavor it had to consume. The hunt had begun. Chapter 5 End. Chapter 6. A banquet of war. A fragile peace had settled over Kuo in days following the skirmish with Riser Phoenix. For the Occult Research Club, it was a time of quiet confidence, the memory of their unexpected success a warm, strengthening glow. They trained with a renewed vigor. Their movements more synchronized, their teamwork more intuitive. Yet, beneath the surface, a new and unsettling current was beginning to flow. It started as a feeling. Akano was the first to notice it. A subtle pressure in the atmosphere that felt like the air before a lightning strike, but without the attendant energy. It was a strange emptiness, a spiritual vacuum that seemed to suck the warmth from the air. Rias felt it too, a faint, irritating drag on her demonic power, like trying to walk through water. "Something is wrong," she said one afternoon, standing at the window of the clubroom and looking out over a perfectly sunny day that felt inexplicably ominous. "The ley lines of the town feel sluggish, drained." "I feel it too," Kiba added, his hand resting on the hilt of a practiced sword. "There's a sense of desperation in the air. It's faint, but it's there." Issei, who was less attuned to such subtle energies, just shivered. "I don't know about all that, but it's definitely creepy out today. It feels like something's watching." Their unease was given a voice by the sudden, frantic flare of a magical communication circle. Sona Citri's face appeared, her unshakable composure completely gone. Her glasses were askew, and a thin line of sweat beaded on her temple. "Rias, get your peerage to the industrial district on the west side of town. Now." "Sona, what is it?" "A stray?" Rias asked, her team already moving, their relaxed postures snapping into combat readiness. "I don't know what it is." Sona's voice was strained. "The energy signature is off the charts. It reads as divine, but it's been corrupted, twisted into something hungry. It's not fighting, Rias. It's eating. It's consuming everything. Buildings, the ground, stray animals. We've engaged it, but our attacks, they just get absorbed. Hurry." The line went dead. The Grimoire peerage didn't hesitate. They burst from the old school building, a crimson teleportation circle flaring to life and swallowing them whole, depositing them seconds later on a rooftop overlooking the industrial district. The scene below was one of silent, creeping horror. It wasn't a scene of fiery destruction, but of bleak consumption. A creature made of shifting, viscous shadow, vaguely humanoid in shape, was moving through the warehouses. It had no discernible features except for a gaping, cavernous maw that seemed to be a tear in reality itself, a vortex of absolute nothingness. Light, sound, and life were all being drawn into it. The ground in its wake was gray and desiccated, crumbling to dust. Sona's student council was there, launching precise magical attacks that vanished into the creature's form without a trace. On another side, Zenobia and Irina were trying to get close, their holy swords drawn. Zenobia swung Durandal, a wave of pure, destructive holy power arcing towards the monster. The wave hit the shadow, and instead of exploding, it simply unraveled, its energy siphoned away into the void-like creature. "It's no use," Sona yelled, her peerage falling back to regroup with Rias's. "Nothing we throw at it works. It just eats the energy." "What is that thing?" Issei stammered. Is bravado failing him in the face of such an unnatural enemy? "It's a god," Zenobia said, joining them, her face pale. "Or it was. I can feel the divine core, but it's been wrapped in something else. Something profane." The creature, having finished consuming a small power substation, turned its featureless head. Its movements were slow, deliberate, and utterly terrifying. It began to move, not randomly, but with a clear sense of purpose, heading directly toward the center of town. "It has a destination," Rias realized with a jolt of ice-cold dread. It wasn't moving toward the school or any other known power center. It was moving toward the park. It was moving toward Naruto's stall. Naruto was humming to himself as he sliced green onions with practiced, rhythmic chops. Business was good. Asia was taking a customer's order, her smile bright and genuine. The peaceful, mundane routine of his new life was a comforting balm. He paused, the knife hovering over the cutting board. He felt a tremor, not in the ground, but in the air itself. A deep, gnawing emptiness was approaching, a hunger so vast it felt like a black hole against the vibrant life energy of the world. "Kit," Kurama's deep voice rumbled in the back of his mind. The fox's usual grumpy tone laced with a genuine disgust. "There is something unnatural coming. It reeks of a hunger that has forgotten what it means to be full." Naruto's eyes narrowed. He looked up just as the first screams echoed from the distance. People were running, a tide of panic flowing away from the western edge of the park. And then he saw it. The creeping shadow, the thing that consumed the light, moving inexorably towards his stall. The combined forces of the Grimoire and Sea-Tree peerages, along with the two exorcists, arrived moments later, forming a desperate defensive line in front of the stall. "Naruto, get out of here!" Rias shouted, her body glowing with the crimson energy of the power of destruction. "Take Asia and run. And go where?" Naruto asked, his voice calm. He didn't move. He simply watched the approaching entity, his mind working at shinobi speeds. This wasn't an opponent you could punch. It was a phenomenon, a concept. You couldn't beat a concept with raw power. The creature stopped about 50 yards away. It ignored the arrayed supernatural might before it. Its entire focus, its entire being, was directed at Naruto. A low, guttural moan emanated from its maw, a sound of pure, unending craving. It wanted the source of the divine flavor it had tasted on the wind. It wanted to consume him. "It's not interested in us," Sona yelled. "It's after him. We have to hold it back," Kiba shouted, summoning a dozen swords that erupted from the ground. The battle became a desperate attempt to buy time. Rias launched a sphere of destructive energy. The shadow god opened its maw wider, and the sphere was swallowed whole, causing the creature to shudder in something that looked like pleasure. Akino's lightning, Xenovia's holy power, Sona's water magic, all were consumed, feeding the very enemy they were trying to fight. Naruto watched for a moment longer, his expression one of intense concentration. He understood. It was like fighting the Gedo Mazo. It just absorbed ninjutsu. Brute force was not only useless, it was detrimental. But this creature wasn't fueled by chakra. It was fueled by a concept, hunger. And Naruto knew, with a certainty that resonated deep in his soul, that the only way to fight a concept was with its perfect opposite. He turned to his cooking station. Asia looked at him, her eyes wide with fear. "Naruto-san, what are you doing?" "Fighting," he said, his voice calm and steady, a rock in the swirling sea of chaos. "I need your help. Keep the water boiling. And don't be scared." He closed his eyes. The sounds of the desperate battle, the screams, the fizzle of magic being consumed, all of it faded away. He took a deep breath, and the world slowed down. He extended his senses, not his chakra, but his very spirit, into the world around him. He felt the rustle of the leaves on the ginkgo tree, the cool dampness of the earth beneath his feet, the warmth of the setting sun on his skin. He drew it all in. Natural energy, pure and untainted, flowed into him. Orange pigment appeared around his eyes. He had entered sage mode. But he wasn't gathering energy for a Rasenshuriken. He was gathering it to cook. He moved with a speed and precision that was breathtaking. He took a small amount of rice flour, mixing it with the perfectly heated water Asia was tending. He didn't just knead the dough. He poured the life energy of the world into it. The dough began to glow with a soft, gentle, golden light, the warmth of the sun captured in its very essence. He molded it into 3 perfect spheres, skewering them on a stick. It was a simple dango. The others were being pushed back. The creature was getting closer, its hunger growing more palpable, a crushing force of spiritual gravity. "We can't hold it," Issei yelled, his armor cracking under the strain of the creature's passive energy drain. Naruto placed the glowing dango on his small grill. He didn't just toast it. He said it with the concept he had built in his mind, the perfect counter to the Gyula's influence. He focused all his will, all his experience with loneliness and desire, all his belief in connection and camaraderie, into this one, simple dish. He was not making food to sat hunger. He was creating a meal that embodied the very concept of satisfaction. The feeling of a full belly, a warm heart, and a peaceful soul. The dango was finished. It no longer just glowed. It pulsed with a gentle, golden light, radiating a feeling of profound contentment that pushed back against the creature's aura of despairing hunger. "Hey!" Naruto yelled, his voice cutting through the din of battle. The creature stopped. Its gaping maw turned directly to him. Naruto held up the glowing dango. "You're hungry, right?" he said, his voice devoid of fear. "Then eat this." With a flick of his wrist, he threw the skewer. It flew through the air, not like a weapon, but like an offering, a perfect golden arc against the darkening sky. The creature's instincts were absolute. It could not resist. Its maw opened wide and it swallowed the dango whole. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, the creature froze. A shudder racked its shadowy form. It wasn't a shudder of pleasure this time, but one of profound, systemic shock. The pure, conceptual energy of satisfaction detonated within the endless void of its hunger. It was a paradox bomb. A feeling of absolute fulfillment warring with a state of absolute craving. The shadow began to crack. Golden light poured from the fissures. The guttural moan of hunger was replaced by a soft, sighing sound. A sound of release. The corrupting, shadowy shell, the Gyula's influence, shattered and dissolved into nothingness, like smoke on the wind. Left in its place, floating for a brief second in the air, was a small, timid-looking figure in ancient robes, a minor kami of the harvest, its eyes wide with confusion. It gave a small, grateful nod towards Naruto, and then its form faded away, its divine energy. Now purified, returning to the earth from whence it came. Silence. The assembled devils and exorcists stood frozen, their weapons lowered, their minds struggling to process what they had just witnessed. They had thrown the pinnacle of their demonic, holy, and magical powers at a god-level threat and had only succeeded in feeding it. And Naruto Uzumaki had defeated it. With a dumpling. Ria stared at him, her mouth slightly agape. Sona pushed her glasses up her nose, her analytical mind completely short-circuited. Zenobia looked from her holy sword to Naruto, a profound, faith-shaking question in her eyes. This wasn't a fluke. This wasn't a trick. This was a power on a scale they couldn't even begin to comprehend. In a sealed chamber deep within the underworld, Sears X Lucifer watched the scene play out on a massive observation mirror, his handsome face grim. Beside him, a figure of pure, radiant light shimmered, the Archangel Michael, his golden wings folded behind him. They had been observing the anomaly in Kuo for weeks, and what they had just seen had confirmed their greatest fears and wildest hopes. The Gyula's energy signature, Michael said, his voice a chorus of soft chimes. Faint, but unmistakable. I thought it was sealed for good after the First Great War. Seals can weaken, Sears replied, his eyes fixed on Naruto's image. But its influence countered so elegantly. He didn't destroy the creature. He saved it. He purified it. His power is not of the divine, Michael mused, yet it produces a result purer than any exorcism. He is an unknown, a variable that balances on the knife's edge between being a savior and a catastrophe. Sears nodded. The factions are already circling him. This incident will not go unnoticed. He can no longer be allowed to remain a simple cook. He turned to the Archangel, his decision made. We need to meet him. Together. Before someone else decides what to do with him. Michael's ethereal form inclined its head in agreement. The game had just changed, and a human boy with a ramen stall had become the most important piece on the board. And far away, in the place of unending twilight, the Gyula recoiled, not in pain, but in understanding. Its pawn had been lost, its direct assault a failure. The source of the divine flavor was protected by a power that was anathema to its own. A new strategy was required. Direct consumption had failed, so it would have to spread its influence wider, more subtly. It would not attack the chef. It would corrupt his customers. It would turn the very act of eating, across all the realms, into a vector for its insidious, endless hunger. Chapter 6 End. Chapter 7. The weight of a crown, the warmth of a hearth. The Dango incident, as Issei had dubbed it, did not remain a secret. An event that involved two of the underworld's most prominent heiresses, the church's top exorcists, and the purification of a corrupted god could not be contained. Whispers turned into reports, and reports turned into a political firestorm. To the devil nobility, the story was terrifyingly simple. A human, an unknown variable of immense power, had appeared in the territory of the Grimoire clan. The invitation that arrived was not a request. It was a summons, delivered by a regal woman in a French maid's uniform who moved with the silent, implacable grace of a predator. Graphia Lucifer, the strongest queen, and wife of the great Satan Sears, appeared at Naruto's stall one evening, her silver hair and crimson eyes seeming to absorb the light. She did not address Rias, who was present and paled at her arrival. She addressed Naruto directly. Naruto Uzumaki, Graphia said, her voice a cool, melodic monotone that held the authority of a royal decree. By order of Lord Sears Lucifer, you were cordially invited to attend a banquet at the Grimoire Palace in the capital city of Lucifad. Your presence is required to address certain political complications. It was a velvet glove wrapped around a fist of iron. A refusal would be a direct insult to one of the four great Satans, an act that could easily be construed as treason. "I'm not a politician," Naruto said simply, wiping down a bowl. "I'm a cook." "Your profession is irrelevant," Graphia stated, her gaze unwavering. "Your actions have made you a figure of political significance. Lord Lucifer wishes to quell the unrest your presence has caused. The Phoenix clan is demanding your head." Rias stepped forward. "Graphia-sama, he is under my protection. I will handle the Phoenix." "You will not," Graphia interrupted, her tone final. "This has escalated beyond a simple peerage dispute. This is a matter of state. Naruto Uzumaki will come to the underworld. That is not a request." Later that night, after Graphia had departed, the Grimoire peerage convened at Naruto's stall. The mood was grim. "It's a trap," Issei declared. "They'll get you there and lock you up in some lab." "It is a dangerous situation," Kiba agreed, his expression serious. "The devil nobility is ancient and treacherous. They fear what they do not understand." Rias looked at Naruto, her expression torn. "They are right. My brother's intentions may be good, but he is still a politician. The banquet will be a viper's nest. They will try to test you, to claim you, to break you." Naruto listened to their warnings, to their genuine fear for his safety. He looked at Asia, who was quietly wringing her hands, her eyes wide with worry. He had spent his entire life being a political piece, a Jinchuriki to be feared and used by his village. He had no desire to step back into that world. But he also saw the fear in his friend's eyes. His refusal wouldn't just affect him. It would bring the wrath of the underworld down on Rias and everyone she cared about. It would put Asia, who had only just found a safe haven, in danger. He let out a long sigh. "Fine," he said, "I'll go." A wave of relief and renewed anxiety washed over the group. "But I'm not going as a guest," he continued, a new, determined glint in his eyes. "I'm not going to be a show pony for them to inspect. If they want to understand me, they can do it on my terms." He looked at Rias. "Tell your brother I accept his invitation. But I'm coming as the chef. I'll cook their banquet." The sheer, audacious confidence of the counter-offer left them speechless. To walk into the heart of a hostile power structure not as a supplicant, but to take control of their most sacred tradition, the feast, was an incredible gamble. It was either an act of supreme arrogance or supreme genius. The journey to the underworld was a disorienting experience. A crimson transportation circle opened a rift in reality, and Naruto stepped through from the familiar night of Kuo into a world bathed in the perpetual twilight of a crimson sky. Strange, Gothic architecture twisted towards the heavens, and the very air was thick with a palpable energy, a heavy blank edge of demonic power that made the hair on his arms stand up. Graphia led them to the Grimoire Palace, a sprawling, magnificent structure of obsidian and marble that seemed to have been carved from a mountain. As they entered the grand foyer, the sheer opulence was staggering. But more intimidating than the wealth were the dozens of eyes that instantly fell upon him. Devils in fine clothes, with features ranging from almost human to subtly monstrous, watched him from balconies and hallways, their whispers like the rustling of dry leaves. Greed, fear, contempt, and a raw, predatory curiosity radiated from them. Naruto ignored it all. His gaze was fixed on a set of large, swinging doors at the end of a long hallway. The smells of roasting meat and baking bread wafted from it. "The kitchens," he said to Graphia, his tone leaving no room for argument. "Take me there." Graphia's impassive expression flickered with a hint of surprise. She had expected him to be intimidated, to look to Rias for support. Instead, he was focused, utterly unintimidated, and was already taking charge. She gave a slight, almost imperceptible nod and led the way. The palace kitchens were a chaotic symphony of heat, noise, and motion. Dozens of uniformed devil chefs rushed about, sweating over massive cauldrons and roaring fires. The head chef, a large, bull-headed devil with a magnificent mustache, was bellowing orders. He stopped short when Graphia entered, his eyes widening when he saw the human boy with her. "Lady Graphia, what is the meaning of this? The banquet is in 2 hours. I have no time for visitors." "This is Naruto Uzumaki," Graphia announced to the kitchen at large. "By order of Lord Lucifer, he will be assuming control of the banquet preparations." The chaos screeched to a halt. Every chef froze. staring at Naruto with open disbelief. The head chef's face turned a dangerous shade of purple. A human, cook for the nobility. This is an insult. I refuse. Naruto walked past him without a word. He ran a hand over a prep surface, checking for cleanliness. He lifted the lid on a simmering pot, inhaling the aroma and his brow furrowing slightly. He moved with a quiet, calm authority. That was more commanding than any shouted order. The broth is scorching, he said, his voice cutting through the silence. You're losing the deeper flavors. And your root vegetables are overcooked. They'll be mush by the time they're served. He turned and faced the stunned head chef, his blue eyes clear and direct. This is the most important meal this palace will serve all year. You can either stand there and complain, or you can help me make sure it's perfect. He wasn't angry. He wasn't arrogant. He was simply stating facts. His absolute, unshakable competence was an aura in itself. The head chef, who lived and died by the quality of his food, found himself unable to argue with an assessment that he knew, deep down, was correct. He sputtered for a moment, then let out a grudging grunt. What do you need? Naruto smiled. Let's get to work. The great hall of the Grimoire Palace was a sea of intrigue. Hundreds of the underworld's most powerful figures were gathered, their conversations a low, dangerous murmur. The air crackled with political tension. At the head table sat Searzek's Lucifer, his red hair a stark contrast to his calm, smiling demeanor. Beside him, Graphia stood, ever watchful. When the food began to arrive, a hush fell over the hall. The presentation was simple, rustic, lacking the ostentatious flair the nobility was accustomed to. The first course was a clear consommé with a single, perfectly crafted dumpling. Lord Phoenix, Riser's father and a pompous, powerfully built man, sneered. This is what the human offers. Peasant soup. He took a defiant sip. The flavor hit him instantly. It was a taste of pure, unyielding pride. Not the arrogant pride he projected, but the true, foundational pride of the Phoenix lineage, the honor of their regenerative abilities, the glory of their fiery bloodline. The ancient history of their noble house. It was a taste of his own best self, and it left him momentarily speechless. The courses continued. There was a grilled fish dish that tasted of fierce, passionate ambition, a slow-roasted boar that embodied the savage, unyielding strength of the demonic race, a simple salad of underworld flora that tasted of the deep, historical roots of their entire civilization. Naruto wasn't just feeding their bodies, he was feeding their very identity, reminding them of the noblest aspects of what it meant to be a devil. The murmuring in the hall slowly died down, replaced by a sense of grudging, astonished respect. But Lord Phoenix would not be so easily swayed. His family's honor had been slighted. His son had been humiliated. He stood, his goblet slamming onto the table. This is a farce, he boomed, his voice echoing through the silent hall. We are being charmed by a charlatan. This human uses a forbidden emotional manipulation magic, a soul art to trick our senses and cloud our judgment. He is a weapon Rias Grimoire has brought among us to cheat her way to power. I demand he be seized and his magic inspected. The accusation hung in the air, thick and poisonous. Several other lords, allied with the Phoenix clan, stood in agreement. The mood in the hall soured instantly. Before Searzek could even raise a hand to restore order, the doors to the kitchen swung open. Naruto walked out, wiping his hands on his apron. He was not intimidated by the hundreds of enraged, powerful devils glaring at him. He looked like a chef who had just been interrupted during his dinner service. He walked directly to Lord Phoenix, his expression calm. He held a single, small plate. On it was a single sukune, a simple grilled chicken meatball on a skewer, glazed with a dark, sweet sauce. He didn't argue. He didn't defend himself. He just held out the plate. You say I trick the senses, Naruto said, his voice clear and steady. Then taste this. No broth, no complex flavors, just a simple piece of grilled chicken. Then tell them all what you feel. It was a direct challenge, a gauntlet thrown down in front of the entire devil nobility. Lord Phoenix was trapped. To refuse would be to admit cowardice. To accept was to walk into the human's trap. His pride left him no choice. With a sneer, he snatched the skewer and bit into the meatball with a savage crunch. The glaze was sweet and savory. The chicken was juicy and flavorful. And the feeling was not pride. It was not ambition. It was pure, unvarnished, ice-cold fear. It wasn't a magical illusion of terror. It was the taste of Lord Phoenix's own soul. He tasted his own deep-seated fear of the Phoenix clan's waning influence in a changing underworld. He tasted the bitter, gnawing fear that his son, Riser, was not strong enough to lead their family. He tasted the desperate, terrified ambition to cling to power at any cost, because he was afraid of what would happen if he lost it. It was the secret, ugly truth that fueled all his blustering and rage, and it flooded his senses, raw and undeniable. He made no sound, but his aura, the very projection of his demonic power, wavered and shifted. The arrogant, fiery confidence was gone, replaced by a flickering, unstable energy that every single person in the hall could feel. They could feel his fear. His bluff had been called. His soul laid bare for all to see. He staggered back, his face ashen, and fell into his chair, utterly defeated. The hall was tomb silent. Naruto had won. He hadn't used a weapon or a spell. He had used the truth. Sears Lucifer stood, a slow, genuine smile spreading across his face. "It seems the matter is settled," he announced, his voice ringing with finality. Quote, "Let it be known that Naruto Uzumaki is no charlatan. He is a true master of his craft, and he is a friend and ally to the House of Grimori and, by extension, to my own." The declaration was an earthquake. With those words, Naruto was no longer just a human cook. He was a protected asset of the great Satan himself. Later that night, in Sears's private study, Naruto served one final meal. Just two bowls of simple akazuke, rice with green tea poured over it. One for Sears, and one for Graphia. Sears took a bite. The warmth of the tea, the simplicity of the rice, the salty tang of the top. Pings. It tasted of a life he had almost forgotten. It tasted of the simple freedom of being Sears Grimori, a young, passionate devil in love, before he had shouldered the immense, crushing weight of the name, Lucifer, and the crown of the great Satan. It was the taste of a happiness he had sacrificed for the sake of his people, and it brought a sad, wistful smile to his face. Graphia, the perfect, stoic queen who had locked her emotions away for centuries behind a mask of flawless duty, took her own bite. The flavor bypassed her legendary composure. It tasted of a whirlwind romance, of stolen moments in a time of war. Of the fierce, passionate, untamed love she felt for the man, not the king, who sat beside her. It was a warmth she had forgotten she was capable of feeling, and her crimson eyes, for the first time in centuries, shimmered with tears. She looked at her husband, and he looked at her, and in that shared moment, a bond that had been strained by the weight of their roles was quietly, powerfully reaffirmed. They both looked at the young man who had done this with a simple bowl of rice and tea. They saw not a weapon to be used, but a miracle to be treasured. Thousands of miles away, in a hidden library illuminated by magically sustained candlelight, a group of figures in hooded robes gathered around a large, ornate table. A projection of the underworld flickered above it. Data streams scrolling beside the image of the Grimori Palace. The subject made contact with the highest echelons of the devil hierarchy, one reported. The energy readings during the banquet were unprecedented. He can influence the very emotional state of their ruling class. A man at the head of the table, his face hidden in shadow, steepled his fingers. His name was Valerius, and his eyes were the color of cold, hard steel. This confirms our hypothesis. His ability is conceptual. It bypasses conventional defenses. In the hands of the devils, it is a tool of subjugation. In our hands, he stood, his voice ringing with the chilling conviction of a zealot. In our hands, it is the scalpel that will excise the cancer of the supernatural from this world. He is not their ally. He is our weapon. The time for observation is over. Begin preparations to acquire the asset. Chapter 7 End. Chapter 8. A dish served with vengeance. The underworld banquet had changed things. Naruto's street. All was no longer just a local curiosity, it was a landmark. His clientele, once a mix of human locals and the occasional stray devil, had diversified. It was no longer surprising to see a fallen angel in a business suit patiently waiting in line behind a human high school student, or one of Sona Citri's peerage members studiously taking notes on the flavor profile of a Shio ramen. The Grimori peerage had become fixtures. Their presence a comfortable and familiar part of the nightly rhythm. They didn't just come to eat. they came to be. The stall had become their unofficial secondary clubhouse. A neutral ground where the pressures of their demonic lives seemed to melt away in the warm, savory steam. On this particular evening, the atmosphere was light, almost celebratory. Rias, free from the immediate threat of Riser Phoenix, laughed freely, a sound that was less the calculated charm of a noblewoman and more the genuine joy of a young woman among friends. Akano, no longer hiding as much behind her sultry facade, engaged in playful banter with Issei, her teasing now lacking its former sharp edge. Kaneko sat on her usual stool, a small, contented smile on her face as she worked her way through a bowl of noodles. While Asia happily helped Naruto by passing out drinks. I still can't believe you told the head of the Phoenix clan his soul tasted like fear, Issei said, laughing boisterously. His face. I would have paid to see it. It was a masterstroke of political theater, Kiba remarked, his tone full of admiration. You dismantled his entire platform without raising your voice. Naruto just shrugged, a grin on his face as he expertly strained a batch of noodles. He was being a jerk. I just served him what he was already full of. The easy camaraderie, the simple, peaceful moment, was so perfect that its shattering was all the more violent. It began without a sound. A faint, gray light pulsed from unseen points around the park's perimeter. Akano, who was just about to unleash a small, teasing spark of lightning at Issei, froze. Her hand, crackling with purple energy a second ago, was now inert. The power she could summon as easily as breathing was simply gone. What? She whispered, her eyes wide. Simultaneously, the crimson aura that constantly surrounded Rias flickered and died. Kiba reached for the hilt of his sword, his eyes darting around, but the connection to his sacred gear felt sluggish. Muted, a heavy, oppressive stillness fell over them, a field of energy that didn't attack their bodies, but smothered their powers. It's a suppression field, so, Na Citri's voice called out as she and her peerage appeared from the shadows, their own magic sputtering. High density, multi-spectrum. It's targeting demonic, angelic, and holy energy. Before anyone could react, solid walls of pale, shimmering light erupted from the ground, boxing in the stall and the Grimoire peerage in a 20-meter square. They were trapped, their greatest weapons nullified. From the darkness outside the barrier, figures emerged. They were human, dressed in sleek, gray tactical gear that bore no insignia. They moved with the silent, coordinated efficiency of elite soldiers, armed with strange, technologically advanced weapons that hummed with a contained, anti-magic energy. And then, their leader walked through the shimmering barrier as if it wasn't there, his steps calm and measured. He was a man with short, immaculately styled silver hair and eyes the color of cold steel. He wore a long, tailored coat over his combat gear, giving him the appearance of a scholar and a general rolled into one. He stopped 10 feet from the stall, his gaze passing over the powerless devils with dismissive indifference before settling on Naruto. Naruto Uzumaki, the man said, his voice calm, articulate, and utterly devoid of emotion. My name is Valerius. I am the director of the Aegis of Sophia. I am not here to harm you. I am here to offer you a purpose. Aegis of Sophia, Rias demanded, stepping in front of Naruto, her body instinctively shielding him despite her dampened power. We've never heard of you. And you were never meant to, Valerius replied coolly. We are the silent guardians of humanity. The force that seeks to correct the gross imbalance of a world where beings like you treat our homes as your personal battlefields. He looked back at Naruto. Your ability is unique. A power that can pacify, influence, and control the most powerful and volatile beings in existence without a single act of violence. It is the perfect tool. A scalpel to excise a cancer. I'm a chef, Naruto said. His voice level, his hands still resting on the counter. He wasn't afraid. He was calculating. You are a weapon, Valerius countered, his voice ringing with chilling conviction. And a weapon of your magnitude cannot be left in the hands of those it was meant to control. You will come with us. We will give you the resources, the platform, to bring a true, lasting peace to this world, an enforced peace, where the ambitions of devils and the dogma of angels can no longer threaten the lives of innocent humans. He spoke with the absolute certainty of a zealot. A man who had seen a truth so terrible it had burned away all doubt. I watched my family die, he said, his voice dropping slightly, the first hint of emotion cracking his steel facade. They weren't killed by a stray devil or a fallen angel. They were incinerated in the crossfire of a territorial dispute between two high-class devils whose names they never even knew. They were acceptable loss in a game they never knew they were a part of. Never again. With your power, we can make them all kneel. We can make them all peaceful. We can end the game. Naruto listened, and in Valerius's words, he heard the echoes of ghosts. The pain of Nagato. The flawed logic of Obito. The desperate, violent desire for order that had driven Sasuke. He understood the pain, the rage that drove a man to such an extreme. And he knew it was a lie. You don't want peace, Naruto said quietly. You want control. You want to put everyone in a cage you built, because you're afraid of what's outside of it. Forcing people to feel something, even if it's peace, isn't freedom. It's just a prettier cage. Valerius's expression hardened. The flicker of emotion was gone. Your consent is not a prerequisite. Why? Oh, you are too important to be left to your own misguided sentimentality. Take him. The Aegis soldiers raised their weapons. The Grimoire peerage, powerless but defiant, moved to intercept them. But Naruto was faster. In the blink of an eye, he was no longer a calm, unassuming chef. The posture, the look in his eyes, everything shifted. He became a blade. He ducked under the counter, and in a single, fluid motion, came up with 2 handfuls of something from a spice container. With a flick of his wrists, he threw the contents at the first 2 soldiers. It was a custom blend of the hottest peppers in the world, ghost peppers, scorpion peppers, Carolina reapers, ground into a fine, aerosolized powder. The soldiers gasped as the hyper-concentrated capsaicin hit their eyes and lungs. They dropped their weapons, screaming and clawing at their faces, their advanced technology useless against a weapon as primal as pure, unadulterated pain. Flash bangs, Naruto said to the stunned devils behind him. Kitchen style. He moved. He didn't use Rasengans or shadow clones, just a blur of motion and a mastery of his environment. He vaulted over the counter, grabbing a heavy cast iron skillet. He spun, using the skillet to deflect a blast of concussive energy from one soldier's rifle, the force of the blow ringing through the air. He didn't stop, his momentum carrying him forward. He slammed the Florida T of the skillet against the side of another soldier's helmet, dropping him without a sound. Valerius watched, his cold composure finally cracking with surprise. He had expected a strange power. He had not expected a highly trained, brutally efficient combatant. He's a trained operative, Valerius commanded. Non-lethal takedown. Subdue him. Naruto was a whirlwind. He slid across the ground, using a ladle to hook the ankle of one soldier and send him sprawling. He snatched up a pair of butcher's cleavers, not to cut, but using their flat sides and pommels to strike at joints and nerve clusters with a surgeon's precision. This wasn't the brawling of a street fighter, it was the disciplined, economic violence of a shinobi. Every move had a purpose. Disarm, disable, neutralize. One of the Aegis soldiers, a large, brutish man, managed to get close, his hands reaching for Naruto. A flicker of unnatural hunger flashed in the soldier's eyes, a desperation that made his movements reckless. He lunged, leaving himself wide open. Naruto, sensing the strange bloodlust, spun inside his guard, and a sharp jab of his knuckles to the man's throat made him choke and collapse, clutching his stomach as if in the throes of some terrible, gnawing cramp. Valerius himself finally entered the fray, drawing a high-frequency blade that hummed with energy. He was fast, his style a textbook fusion of various sword arts. But Naruto was faster. He dropped the cleavers and met the blade with nothing but the iron skillet, parrying and blocking, the screech of metal on metal echoing in the contained space. You can't win, Valerius grunted, pressing his attack. We have studied you. We know your limits. You studied a chef. Naruto shot back, ducking under a wide slash and slamming the skillet into Valerius's side, making him stumble. You should have studied a ninja. In that moment of Valerius's imbalance, Naruto didn't press the attack. He created distance, his hands flying through a single, familiar hand sign. Kage Bunshin no Jutsu. With a puff of smoke, 2 perfect copies of Naruto appeared beside him, each one picking up a kitchen knife. The sight of the legendary, impossible jutsu made Rias and the others, who had been watching the fight with a mixture of shock and awe, gasp audibly. Valerius stared at the three Narutos, his mind finally grasping the true scale of his miscalculation. This wasn't just a human with a strange ability. This was something else entirely, a warrior from a world with a different set of rules. He knew when a mission was a failure. "Withdraw," he commanded, his voice tight with controlled fury. "All units, withdraw." The Aegis soldiers disengaged, deploying smoke grenades to cover their retreat. The gray energy barriers flickered and died. Valerius gave Naruto one last, long look. A look that was no longer of a collector appraising an asset, but of a rival appraising an equal. "This isn't over," he said, before disappearing into the smoke. The suppression field dissipated. Power flooded back into the devils. Akino's hands crackled with furious lightning, and Rias's destructive aura flared to life. But their targets were gone. They were left standing in the silent, smoke-filled park, surrounded by the groaning, disabled forms of elite human soldiers. They all turned to look at Naruto, who was calmly picking up his skillet, his two clones vanishing in puffs of smoke. He looked back at their wide, questioning eyes, and gave them a slightly sheepish grin. "Sorry about the mess," he said. "Guess I have a few more secrets than just what I put in the broth." The immediate threat was gone. But the peace had been irrevocably shattered. A new, intelligent, and ideologically driven enemy now knew who Naruto was. The Grimoire peerage now knew he was far more than a simple cook. And Valerius, retreating into the shadows, was left to ponder not only Naruto's unexpected combat prowess, but the flicker of unnatural, ravenous hunger he had. Even in his own soldiers' eyes, another piece of a puzzle he was beginning to realize was far more terrifying than any devil or god. The Gyula's plague was spreading, its symptoms appearing even among his own disciplined ranks. Chapter 8 End. Chapter 9. The Hungering Shadow. The smoke from the aegis of Sophia's retreat had long since dissipated, but a different, more complicated haze hung in the air around Naruto's stall. The disabled soldiers had been taken away by Sona's peerage for interrogation, leaving the Grimoire clan and Naruto standing in a circle of stunned silence. The remnants of the fight, a dented skillet, a discarded cleaver, the lingering scent of military-grade smoke bombs mixed with hyper-concentrated chili powder, were stark evidence of the night's violent turn. The questions hung unspoken in the air, thick and heavy. Rias, Akino, Hiba, Kaneko, Asia, and Issei all stared at Naruto, their expressions a complex cocktail of shock, awe, and a deep, unsettling curiosity. The quiet, kind-hearted chef they had befriended, the man whose greatest weapon they thought was a perfectly balanced broth, had just dismantled a squad of elite tactical soldiers with a level of brutal efficiency that bespoke a life of intense, violent conflict. It was Asia who broke the silence, her voice small and trembling. "Naruto-san. Who are you?" Naruto looked at their faces, at the genuine concern and confusion in their eyes. He saw friends, a new family, looking at him as if he were a stranger. The thought of losing this, the simple, honest peace he had found, was a cold knot in his stomach. He had spent his entire life wearing masks, the idiot clown, the unstoppable hero, the prophesied savior. Here, he just wanted to be Naruto. But he knew, with a weary certainty, that his past was not a story that could remain untold. He let out a long breath, the air fogging in the cool night. "My old life," he began, his voice quiet, was loud. He leaned against his counter, the familiar wood a grounding presence. He didn't give them names or places. He didn't speak of chakra or tailed beasts or shinobi villages. He spoke in metaphors that were truer than any literal explanation could be. "I came from a place, a village, that wasn't always kind to me," he said, his gaze distant. "I was an outcast. Something I had no control over made them see me as a monster, a threat. So I spent my whole life trying to prove them wrong. I fought to be acknowledged, to earn their respect, to protect them even when they hated me." Kaneko, who had been ostracized for her Nekomata heritage, shifted her weight. Her golden eyes fixed on him with a new, profound understanding. "I became a soldier," Naruto continued. "A very good one. I made friends, found a teacher who was like a father to me, and formed a team that became my family. We fought for our village, for each other." His voice hardened slightly. "But the world I came from was built on conflict. A cycle of hatred that turned friends into enemies. We were all caught in it. I lost my teacher. I had to fight my best friend, my brother in all but blood, because he was consumed by that hatred. Rias thought of the endless, bitter rivalries between devil clans. Kiba, whose friends had been sacrificed for a mad experiment, clenched his fists. Akano thought of her father, of the war that had stolen her mother and branded her a half-breed. Eventually, Naruto said, his voice softening again, a great war came. A war to end all wars. Everyone had to fight. We lost so many people. It was a world of ghosts. He looked at them, his blue eyes holding the weight of 100 battles. In the end, we won. My friend and I, we had one last fight, and we finally understood each other. We broke the cycle, but I lost something in that final battle. I was tired. I didn't want to be a hero or a weapon anymore. I just wanted this. He gestured around the stall, at the simple wooden counter, the gently simmering pot, the scattered stools. A quiet place. A place where I could make things that make people happy, instead of breaking things. A place where I could feed people instead of fighting them. I thought I had left that other life behind. He gave them a small, sad smile. Guess it has a way of following you. The confession settled over them, a quiet, heavy blanket. They didn't understand the details, but they understood the heart of it. They understood the deep, profound weariness in his soul, the desperate value he placed on the peace he had found here. He wasn't a secret agent or a monster in disguise. He was a veteran, a war hero from a world far crueler than their own, who had traded his sword for a ladle. Issei, for once, was speechless. He, who dreamed of being a hero, was standing before someone who had been won and had walked away from it. It was Rias who moved first. She stepped forward and placed a hand on his arm, her touch gentle. "This is your home now, Naruto," she said, her voice firm with conviction. "And we are your family. Your war is over." Rias's words were a promise, but it was one the universe seemed determined to break. The Gyula's new strategy was insidious, a plague that spread not through bites or magic, but through the very act of sustenance. The first reports were dismissed as isolated incidents. A summit between high-ranking devils and fallen angels in the underworld. LD had to be forcibly broken up by Graphia herself when a disagreement over territory devolved into a full-blown food fight, the participants driven by a petty, ravenous greed for the banquet's offerings. Azazel later reported that the food itself tasted bland, unsatisfying, leaving him with a gnawing emptiness. Then, a contingent of Grigori researchers on a long-term assignment began showing signs of extreme lethargy and paranoia. Hoarding rations they claimed had no flavor. In heaven, a squadron of angels tasked with guarding a holy site became irritable and listless, their divine auras dim, as if they were spiritually malnourished, despite being surrounded by ambrosia. The plague was subtle. It didn't make people sick. It made them empty. It attached a spiritual parasite to the act of consumption, sucking all the joy, satisfaction, and connection out of it. Food became mere fuel, and no amount of it could fill the spiritual void it left behind. This void was then filled with the basest of emotions: greed, envy, suspicion, and a mindless, selfish hunger. The bonds of society, forged over shared meals and broken bread, were beginning to rot from the inside out. The situation came to a head when an urgent tri-faction council was called. In a secure chamber created by Searsex's power, the leaders convened. Searsex and a grim-faced Graphia were there. Azazel represented the fallen, looking uncharacteristically serious. Heaven had sent the Archangel Gabriel, her gentle, radiant presence a stark contrast to the grim topic at hand. And, at Searsex's and Azazel's joint insistence, Naruto and Rias were present as well. "My researchers have confirmed it," Azazel began, pacing before a large projection screen showing corrupted energy patterns. "It's a conceptual agent, a spiritual contagion. We've dubbed it the wasting. It attaches to food and drink, but it doesn't taint them physically. It taints the experience of consumption. It severs the connection between the physical act of eating and the spiritual and emotional satisfaction that should come with it. It is, for lack of a better term, a plague of universal dissatisfaction. We have seen its effects," Gabriel said, her voice like the chiming of silver bells, though laced with sorrow. "The bonds of fellowship in our garrisons are fraying. The joy that fuels our light is fading. It is a shadow that starves the soul. The Gyula, Naruto said quietly. Everyone turned to him. When I fought that corrupted god, I felt the creature behind it. Its goal wasn't just to eat. It wanted to make everything as empty as it was. This is its new plan. It failed to eat me, so now it's making the whole world starve, emotionally and spiritually. A heavy silence filled the room. The scale of the threat was staggering. It wasn't an army they could fight. It was an idea, a creeping horror that turned life's most basic necessity into a poison for the soul. Your ability, Naruto-san, Sirzex said, his gaze intense. The food you create seems to be the only known antidote. It generates a pure, incorruptible satisfaction. But you are one man. You cannot host a banquet for all of creation. So we can't cure the symptom, Azazel mused, a dangerous, thoughtful glint in his eye. Which means we have to attack the disease at its source. We have to confront the Gyula itself. Confront a conceptual entity in its home dimension. Graphia countered, her voice sharp. That is a suicide mission. The dimensional gap is chaos incarnate, and the Gyula is that chaos given a singular, hungry purpose. Normally, yes, Azazel agreed. But we have a conceptual weapon of our own. He pointed a thumb at Naruto. Fire with fire. Or, in this case, a feast against a famine. If the Gyula is the embodiment of endless, selfish hunger, we need to create the perfect opposite. A meal that embodies selfless, profound connection. The leaders stared at him. It was a mad, desperate, brilliant idea. Naruto listened, his mind racing. A meal of connection. A dish that could remind an ancient, cosmic horror of what it meant to be full, not just of food, but of fellowship. He thought of the ramen Ichiraku had shared with him, of the fish he had grilled for Rias. Of the kimchi don that had made Akano cry. The power wasn't just in him. It was in the moment, in the shared emotion. He's right, Naruto said, his voice firm. I can feel it, it's possible. But, the ingredients for something like that, they aren't things I can buy at a market. He looked at Rias, at the deep trust in her eyes. My power flows from me, from my own energy and my own will. To make a simple meal that can touch one person's soul, I have to put a piece of myself into it. To make a meal that can touch the soul of a god of hunger, he trailed off, the weight of the task settling on him. I'd need more than just myself. I'd need a power source of pure, positive, emotional energy. The kind you can't get from nature. Gabriel's radiant brow furrowed in thought. What kind of energy do you speak of? Naruto took a deep breath. This was it. The price. The strongest emotions, he said, his voice dropping, the words feeling intensely personal and vulnerable in this room of ancient, powerful beings. Trust, hope, friendship. He paused, then said the last word, the most potent of all. Love. He looked at Rias, his gaze unwavering. To create this dish, to fight this thing, I can't do it alone. I need the people who have a connection to me to freely and willingly pour their genuine feelings for me into the ingredients. It's the only way to create a power strong enough to rewrite a concept like the Gyula. The implications were staggering. He was asking his friends to open their hearts, to channel the most intimate and powerful parts of their souls into his hands. It was an act of ultimate vulnerability, a level of trust that went beyond life and death. The plan was set. The stakes were clear. All that remained was for Naruto to RN to his friends and ask them to give him their hearts, so he could cook a meal to save the world. Meanwhile, in a sterile, hidden bunker, Valerius slammed his fist onto a steel table. On a monitor before him, a thermal scan of one of his own men showed a cold, empty spot in his chest, a spiritual void that was growing by the hour. The soldier in question had just been confined after trying to cannibalize another operative over a nutrient paste packet. The discipline of the Aegis of Sophia was crumbling, its members becoming paranoid, selfish, and single-minded in their strange, new hunger. Valerius's perfect, logical crusade against the chaos of the supernatural was being undone by a chaos far more insidious. He had wanted to control Naruto's power, to use it as a weapon to enforce order. Now, he was beginning to understand that Naruto's power wasn't a weapon of control. It was the only known cure for the very chaos that was now consuming his own organization from within. His logical mind came to an inescapable, deeply infuriating conclusion. He couldn't acquire the asset. He couldn't defeat the asset. He was going to have to ally with him. Chapter 9 End. Chapter 10. The Last Supper. The air in the occult research club room was thick with the ghost of ozone and the weight of an impossible truth. Naruto stood before them, not as the cheerful chef or the surprise warrior, but a man bearing the weight of a dying world on his shoulders. He had relayed the findings of the Tri-Faction Council, explaining the conceptual plague, the spiritual starvation of the wasting, and the Gyula's insidious, soul-rotting new war. He finished, his gaze sweeping over the faces of his friends, his new, precious family. He saw fear in Asia's wide eyes, grim determination in Kiba's, a simmering rage in Issei's. He saw a storm of complex emotions in Akino's violet depths and a quiet, unshakable solidity in Kaneko. And in Rias's blue-green eyes, he saw a king ready to lead her people through hell itself. Azazel's plan is insane, Issei said, breaking the heavy silence. To fight a god of hunger with a meal. How is that even possible? It is a battle of concepts, Kiba mused, his hand on his chin. A force of absolute consumption versus a force of absolute satisfaction. It is a form of logic I have never considered, but it has a terrifying symmetry. But the ingredients, Akino said softly. Her eyes locked on Naruto. When you told the leaders you needed love, what did you mean? This was the hardest part. Naruto took a deep breath, the words feeling intensely personal, almost too intimate to speak aloud. My cooking, the feeling you get from it, that's a piece of my own spirit, my own will, my own experiences, he explained, his voice low and earnest. It's why it can connect with you. But what we need to create is something infinitely more powerful. A meal that doesn't just connect with a soul, but can rewrite the very concept of one. I don't have enough power, enough life, enough feeling, to do that alone. He looked at each of them in turn, his blue eyes holding a vulnerability they had never seen before. I need you, all of you. I need you to willingly pour your truest, most genuine feelings for me into the ingredients. Your trust in me, your hopes for the future. The bonds we've built, everything that makes us, us. He paused, the final word hanging in the air, heavy and fragile. And yes, your love. In whatever form it takes. It's the only power source pure enough to work. The room was silent. He was asking them to bare their souls, to hand him the most fragile, powerful parts of themselves to be cooked into a meal for a monster. It was an act of trust so absolute it bordered on madness. Rias was the first to move. She walked to the small kitchen area of the clubroom, where they kept supplies for tea and snacks. She picked up a simple, flawless tomato from a bowl on the counter. She turned, holding it in her palm, and looked at Naruto. Her gaze was not that of a king or an heiress, but of a woman making a solemn, unbreakable vow. When I eat your food, she said, her voice clear and strong, I taste freedom. The strength to defy my fate. You gave me that hope. She closed her eyes, her hand tightening around the tomato. A soft, crimson light, the color of her hair and her house sigil, began to glow from within her hand, infusing the simple fruit. You will have my defiance. You will have my hope. You will have all the love of Rias Gramori. She opened her eyes and placed the now pulsating tomato on the counter. The air around it felt warm, vibrant with a fierce, regal passion. Akino was next. She smiled, a genuine, sad, beautiful smile. She picked up a dark, earthy mushroom. You gave me peace, Naruto-kun, she whispered. You took the two warring halves of my soul and showed me they could be whole. A gentle light, a fusion of holy gold and demonic violet, flowed from her into the mushroom. You will have my gratitude. And all the love of a woman who has finally learned to accept herself. One by one, they came forward. Kaneko, silent as always, placed her hand on a block of tofu. A soft, white light enveloped it. You made me feel safe. She stated simply, a universe of meaning in those 5 words. You will have my loyalty. And my love. Asia, tears streaming down her face, touched a bag of rice. A brilliant, pure golden aura, like a sunrise, poured into the grains. You gave me a home when I was lost, she cried softly. You showed me kindness when I expected only hatred. You will have my faith. You will have all of my love, Naruto-san. Quote. Kiba placed a hand on a bottle of fine soy sauce, and a light the color of a polished blade flowed into the dark liquid. You showed me that strength doesn't have to come from vengeance. Issei, his usual bravado gone, replaced by raw, humbling sincerity, slammed his hand on a piece of chashu pork. The green light of his boosted gear flared, but the energy. Why that flowed into the meat was not draconic power, but the fiery, fiercely protective spirit of a young man who would die for his friends. You showed me what a real hero is, he said, his voice thick with emotion. You'll have my spirit, man, all of it. Naruto watched, his heart aching with a profound, overwhelming gratitude. He felt their emotions, their pure, unvarnished souls, flowing into the ingredients, creating a pantry of power unlike any the world had ever known. This was his true strength. Not the fox in his gut or the sage energy in the air, but this. The connections he had forged. Just as he was preparing to begin the ritualistic cooking process, a voice, cold and familiar, echoed from the doorway. An impressive display of emotional resonance. But your plan has a logistical flaw. Everyone spun around. Valerius stood there, alone, his hands raised in a gesture of peace. His usual cold certainty was gone, replaced by a weary, pragmatic urgency. His uniform was singed, and there was a haunted look in his steel-gray eyes. You, Issei snarled, summoning his boosted gear. We're not done with you. Stand down, Valerius commanded, his voice sharp. I am not your enemy tonight. The Gyula is. It is consuming my own organization from within. My soldiers, men and women of iron discipline, are becoming mindless, ravenous animals. My crusade is over. My only mission now is survival. He looked at Naruto, a grudging respect in his eyes. You have a conceptual weapon. But you have no way to deliver it. The dimensional gap is not a place you can simply teleport to. Its chaotic energies will tear you apart. I, however, have a solution. He held up a small device. This vessel generates a stable reality bubble. It can navigate the gap. My forces, what's left of them, can run interference. Drawing the Gyula's attention, I am offering you a path to your battlefield. Rias looked at Naruto, her expression questioning. Naruto met Valerius's gaze, seeing not an enemy, but another desperate soul caught in the storm. We accept, Naruto said simply. The vessel cut through the non-reality of the dimensional gap. Outside the clear canopy, the universe was a nauseating, beautiful chaos of swirling, impossible colors and silent, screaming nebulae. Valerius's soldiers, along with the combined might of the three factions, fleets of devil warships, legions of angels, and Azazel's squadron of magically armored fallen, formed a massive cordon around them, a grand, impossible alliance against a common, cosmic foe. Ahead of them, the Gyula manifested. It was not a creature of flesh and bone, but a being of pure conceptual hunger. It was a vortex of screaming, consumed souls, a maelstrom of gnashing teeth and grasping claws, all centered on a singularity of absolute emptiness that drank the very light from existence. We will hold it. Sirzex's voice boomed over their communications, and a wave of pure, red destructive power, vast enough to erase a small country, slammed into the Gyula, only to be consumed by its infinite void. The battle began, a cataclysm of holy light, demonic power, and advanced technology clashing against a foe that devoured it all. It was a battle they could not win, only endure, buying the precious minutes Naruto needed. Inside the bubble, Naruto worked. The clubroom's kitchen had been transported with them. He wasn't just cooking, he was performing a sacred rite. He took Asia's rice, now glowing with a faith so pure it hurt to look at, and washed it in water that shimmered with Kiba's focused resolve. He cooked it in a large pot, a nabe, over a flame fueled by Issei's indomitable spirit. He added Kaniko's tofu, which tasted of safety, and Akino's mushroom, which resonated with the harmony of acceptance. He laid Rias's tomato, pulsing with defiant hope, at the very heart of the dish. Finally, he created a broth, not from water, but from his own life force, his sage of six paths chakra, and the memories of every bowl of ramen, every shared meal, every connection that had saved him from his own loneliness. He poured it over the ingredients, and the entire pot began to glow with a gentle, multi-hued light, a beacon of pure, concentrated hope in the chaotic darkness. It's ready, he said, his voice strained. The process was draining him, his own life force the catalyst that fused all the emotions together. The vessel moved forward, punching through the battle line. It stopped before the roiling maw of the Gyula. Naruto, with the help of Rias and Akino, lifted the heavy pot. It was not hot to the touch, it was warm, with the gentle heat of a hug. He held it up. He didn't need to shout. The Gyula felt it. The meal was the ultimate paradox, a source of sustenance that promised to end all hunger. Its every instinct, its entire reason for being, screamed at it to consume this ultimate flavor. The void opened. The nabe, the pot, everything was drawn in. And then, silence. The Gyula froze. From within the roiling chaos, the light of the meal began to shine. It was not an explosion. It was a sunrise. For the first time in an eternity, the Gyula tasted something other than absence. It tasted Asia's faith and felt a flicker of belief in something other than its own emptiness. It tasted Kaniko's loyalty and remembered the feeling of not being alone. It tasted Akino's acceptance and felt the warring parts of its own fractured existence find a moment of peace. It tasted Rias's hope and saw the possibility of a dawn after a trillion-year night. And it tasted Naruto's own soul, the flavor of a lonely boy who had saved the world with the simple, unbreakable power of friendship. The screaming of the consumed souls quieted, replaced by a sigh of release. The gnashing void was filled not with matter, but with warmth. The concept of endless hunger was being overridden by the concept of profound connection. The Gyula was not destroyed. It was fulfilled. The monstrous form began to dissolve, not into dust, but into gentle motes of light that faded back into the fabric of the gap. The oppressive, soul-crushing hunger that had plagued the realms vanished, replaced by a quiet, peaceful stillness. The war was over, but the victory had a price. As the last of the Gyula faded, Naruto crumpled to the floor, his body limp. His skin was pale, his breathing shallow. The golden orange of his hair seemed faded, and the vibrant blue of his eyes was dim. He had poured almost everything he was into that final meal. Naruto! Rias screamed, rushing to his side. She felt for his life force. It was a guttering candle flame in a hurricane. He's fading, Asia cried, her hands glowing with healing magic that did nothing against this kind of spiritual exhaustion. The girls surrounded him, their faces a mask of panic and heartbreak. They had won, only to lose the one who had made it all possible. Rias looked at the others, her eyes blazing with a desperate, sudden idea. He gave us his heart, she said, her voice shaking but resolute. We will give him ours. She placed her hand on his chest. Akino put hers on top of Rias's. Then Kaniko, Asia, Zenobia, Irina, all of them. They closed their eyes, focusing not on their power, but on the emotions they had poured into the meal, their gratitude, their loyalty, their hope, their profound, world-saving love. They pushed it out of themselves, not as an ingredient for a dish, but as a transfusion for a soul, a torrent of pure life energy flowing back into the man who had become the center of their world. They felt his spirit, faint and flickering, latch onto their offering. The dim spark began to grow, to strengthen, fed by the combined warmth of their hearts. The color began to return to his face, his breathing deepening. The light behind his eyelids began to flicker. Epilogue. A month later, the nameless food stall under the ginkgo tree was open for business. The world, healed from the wasting, was slowly finding its new equilibrium. The Great Alliance, forged in the fires of the dimensional gap, had held, ushering in an era of unprecedented cooperation. The stall was busier than ever. Azazel was a regular, constantly trying to get Naruto to license his conceptual cooking technology. Sona and her student council often held their meetings at the counter, debating policy over bowls of ramen. Even Valerius had been seen once, standing in the shadows at the edge of the park, a quiet, unreadable expression on his face, before turning and walking away. The sun had set, and the last of the customers had gone home. The paper lantern cast a warm, gentle glow on the scene. Naruto was wiping down the counter, a comfortable, familiar rhythm. He was not alone. Rias was sitting on a stool, leaning her head against his shoulder, her crimson hair spilling over his back. Akino was humming softly as she helped Asia put away the clean bowls. Kaniko was curled up on a bench nearby, asleep in her cat form on Irina's lap, while Zenobia argued playfully with Issei over who had eaten the last piece of chashu. No grand declarations had been made. No choices had been forced. He hadn't chosen one of them. In a way, they had all chosen each other. His life was no longer his own, but a shared existence, a warm hearth around which this strange, powerful, beautiful family had gathered. Naruto finished his work and looked at the faces of his friends, illuminated in the lantern light. He felt a sense of peace so profound it was almost overwhelming. His war was over. He wasn't a Jinchuriki, a hero, or a savior. He was just Naruto. And he was home. "I'm hungry," he said, a wide, familiar grin spreading across his face. "Who wants some ramen?" A chorus of happy, enthusiastic agreement answered him, the sound echoing in the peaceful quiet of the Kuo town night. Chapter 10 End.